All right, we'll call to order the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee. It's April 22nd at 4:30 p.m. We'll move on to item number 1, roll call.
Crary.
Here.
Polf.
Here.
Kwame. Wazowski.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Whitney. Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2, minutes from the meeting of March 25th, 2024.
I'll move approval.
Moved by Holt, second by Osowski. Further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Move on to item number 3, PACE loan request, Sundog Mining. Stratcher.
Thank you, Chairman Weigel, members of the Growth Fund Committee. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Kevin Hatcher, Business Development Manager from the Grand Forks Region EDC, speaking on behalf of the FlexPace request here of 107,692 for Sundog Mining. Fortunate to have Mr. Zachary Keenan and Aaron Hall, who's actually at AUVSI in San Diego. He's online right now, who's available to talk a little bit after I provide the background and the project details here. Also, Daryl Jorgensen here from Gate City Bank. A little bit of background, like I mentioned, Sundog Mining LLC, they're operating as a holding company for Bifrost Manufacturing. They're a Grand Forks established 3D printing company. They specialize in custom manufacturing for various sectors, including not only the relevant to the Bitcoin mining through energy, but agribusiness and UAS as well. Their mission is bridging that gap within the manufacturing industry, providing custom manufacturing of carbon fiber, steel parts, welding, and fabrication to fill in that gap that you see that could be challenging in the to acquire in the more traditional markets. You may be familiar with Bifrost Manufacturing. They were present here back in December of 2023 for the purchase of their 3D printing material. For this project in particular, they're looking to expand into additional facility. They'll still have that facility on the south end of Grand Forks at 1213 Ryland, but they're looking to purchase this former Atrix software building at 2100 Library Circle here. This facility is going to be utilized as a clean space for engineering, designing, some of the clean 3D printing behind it, but more so the administration space as well. Looking at the purchase of this 13,000 square foot facility, and then in result of this project, they're going to grow from that 19 employees with plans to increase in the next 24 months of 31 employees. The total project that we're looking at is $1.2 million. This FlexPace request is to reduce the interest rate from an estimated rate of 7.37% to 3.5% on Gate City Bank's $960,000 note. Owners of the company will contribute an equity portion of $240,000 on the project. The loan request of the growth fund of that 107,692 will leverage Bank of North Dakota's grant portion of $200,000, and the structure of the growth fund note will be deferred for 106 months, followed by the 12 monthly equal installments aligning with the growth fund policy. The security behind the note is a secondary mortgage on the property that's being purchased from the company, along with personal guarantees from the owners, Aaron Hall and Zachary Keenan. And based on this this package here, we're looking at that loan to value for growth fund loans of 88.97%. So I open first off, I'll actually turn it over to Aaron on behalf of the company. Aaron, are you available to speak online here?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Just want to start by saying thank you for everybody for having me today, and apologies that I can't be there in person. It lined up with our AUVSI trip, and we're down here in not so sunny San Diego currently representing Bifrost as a additive manufacturing option to the drone industry. And it's pretty funny because everybody I've ran into so far is all from Grand Forks. I want to start by just kind of clarifying a couple of roles that Kevin might have mentioned that got lost in the midst here. So as Sundog, we've along this journey kind of moved offices regularly, and you know, I don't even unpack my office anymore due to the moves, and we're getting into the fairly professional space of site selection and data center AI. deployments and high level infrastructure. So, it's time that we have a place to call home administratively that looks the part, shows that we can, not only can we walk the walk, but we can look the part too. Now, the main tenet here, and this is where all the growth comes in, will be Bifrost Manufacturing. So what we've found in our short time since we've been here last is that there's a very stark need in our UAS industry, but also just kind of in any manufacturing space of these specific designed solutions, engineered solutions, and we've really grown in that manner. We've grown to 19 employees, and we've outgrown our current space, not for the manufacturing side, but for the engineering side. So the clean shop would be home to future employees that hopefully would be focused on R&D and that higher end engineering work. And this would give them kind of a professional space to do that. We would keep the dirty shop out there at the same time where there's any kind of, we're creating any kind of sparks or welding and all that actually gets done outside in the ag park. So if you guys have any questions for me, I would happily answer them at this time.
Thank you, Aaron. Comments, questions, concerns? Ms. Lisowski?
So this will be, the fifth loan from the city, correct? And I guess I just have a question. Are other companies applying for these loans, or is he the only one? I feel like we talked to Mr. Hall quite a bit, so.
Certainly, numerous other companies, have applied and received loans, FlexPay, PACE loans in the past. Recently, we have talked to Mr. Hall recently. Back in 2023, we spoke to them about the Bifrost Manufacturing one, which was paired with the EDA RLF loan. I think in this case, maybe the fast turnaround of coming back is maybe a sign of the pace of growth of the company is a new kind of expansion, I guess, as Mr. Hall was saying, the expansion of their office space. But certainly, I know Kevin's out there marketing to a variety of different companies.
And I can speak on behalf of the EDC as we are working to actively attract companies into the Grand Forks region and also actively doing our BRE meetings. As companies are talking about those expansions, that's exactly what we're doing. We're talking about the PACE program, we're talking about EDA RLF, talking about potential financial vehicles to help work along their financing programs for an expansion opportunity.
And then how many employees would this loan help bring to the Grand Forks area? Like how many jobs?
So based on that, the report provided by Aaron, right now they're currently at 19 and they're looking to increase to 31 total in the next 24 months.
Will those all be based out of Grand Forks then?
Aaron, can you answer the question where these employees will be located as far as the Grand Forks operations? Will they all be in Grand Forks or portion?
That's correct. It'll be headquartered here in Grand Forks at that building.
Thank you.
Will they work in Grand Forks?
Yes.
Okay.
And we will likely have customers based out of Grand Forks as well because we are a primary sector business.
Okay. Right,
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, thanks for being here virtually and in San Diego, Mr. Hall. Sundog Mining LLC, believe is owned by Mr. Hall, Mr. Keenan, 50/50. Is that who's buying the building? Is that correct? That
Yes,
entity?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay. And then Bifrost will use it. That's a separate entity. I believe that's owned by Mr. Hall, Mr. Keenan. Is it just you two, or is there anyone else in that ownership?
There's also,
Killian Erickson. Sorry, Kevin.
I thought there was a third. So there's a third one, which is the 3D printing arm piece. Sundog Mining LLC, they obviously is going to own a building, but it also is in, I believe, Bitcoin mining. With recent news about Bitcoin halving, I'm not a Bitcoin expert, but I'm curious on thoughts on how that affects the value of Bitcoin and specifically miners in general.
That's actually a great question, Mr. Wolf. I'll try not to go too far in the weeds, but I will explain our rules. As we typically, for the most part, we are landlords. So the miners themselves create a lot more profit in this industry, and there's also always a new, more efficient generation of machine available to be housed at one of our locations. So our risk portfolio through the halving, and this is not our first halving to participate in, is relatively low. The other thing is that we recently developed a piece of property for Bitcoin mining in Texas in the ERCOT marketplace, and the profits from that sale are largely getting deployed in Grand Forks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hall. So and that was a question. You've been through a halving process before?
Yes, we were very, very early on. We didn't have machines running at the time, but we were working in the industry, so we got to see it firsthand play out among the miners. Typically, the supply is shortened and the price goes up. Right now, what you're seeing is transactional value is really high as well. So, a lot of the fear as time goes on and the risk kind of dumbs down. But at the end of the day, these miners will have to mine somewhere. So typically our customers are the newest generation. We have some older gen that are currently upgrading, but the new generation allows them to withstand more volatility in the marketplace because the machines are more efficient, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was doing limited reading. Short term, with less supply, Bitcoin value will go up. Less supply puts more pressure on the miners themselves, and as the newer they are with their technology, the better. Is that a fair assessment?
Fair assessment.
Okay. What does and again, so you've got different miners within your space, so some of your risk is diversified across different miners?
That is correct.
Okay. Maybe a question for Mr. Jorgensen as you look at this from a banking standpoint. I'm with the new expansion and collateral on a new headquarters facility, cash flow coverage, you've looked at that, as well as the existing notes that we would have out. I would guess you're looking at the global picture. Does cash flow, what's the cash flow coverage like with this new debt?
So we calculate the debt service coverage. We do it personally for each of the owners and for the business that's occupying and purchasing the building. All three, both owners and the company, meet and exceed our debt service coverage minimums.
Okay, thank you. And you've already addressed collateral. We'd have a mortgage behind the Gate City position, and we'd be at 89% based on that asset. Okay. I guess I'm comfortable. Thank you for answering my questions.
I just have a quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman Weigel. Quick question, actually, maybe more to Mr. Conlon. Do we typically just mirror the private lender's terms? So I know this might be the first one, I think, where it was a 9-year. Typically it's been like the 5-year balloon. So just wanted to, and nothing to do with specifically with this application, just in general, is that what we typically follow, is just whatever the private lender's doing?
We generally do mirror what the term of the private lender. For rule of thumb for growth fund, for real estate loans like this would be a 10-year deferral, 5-year for working capital, 7 for equipment, and then 10 for real estate. In this case, and Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the buy down will be expended before we reach that 10-year period, which is the reason for the kind of odd number, the 106 months. That's when the buy down funds will be exhausted. So then 12 months from that date, or if they pay off the underlying note sooner, our payments would then start.
Okay. Yeah, and also worth noting too that of the loans outstanding, they're already making monthly payments on about half of them. So, which is great too. So, but to Mrs. Sowski's point, not related to Bifrost or this specific one, is it something to bring up for a max amount? Or personally, I'm under the impression like, hey, if it's working, it's working, and you're still growing, great. I would love them to, if they grow to 100 employees, 200 employees, 300 employees, love them to all be in Grand Forks. So if we can help be a catalyst to that, but it is a point to bring up that. I mean, is there a cap? Is there not? I don't know. Maybe that. I mean, that's not. We don't have time in this meeting, but it is worth maybe just mentioning. I wish more companies would utilize this as well as Bifrost or Sundog has. I mean, I think I give kudos to them and wish them all the success too.
No, that is a legitimate question, Mr. Crary, and Mrs. Houski from the last meeting as well. Based on the conversation from the last meeting, not only talking with Bank of North Dakota, what we identified is, yes, they do have that cap every biennium of their grant max of 500,000, so that's where that cap would be. Additionally, if we did put if we put limitations as a community, we'd be the only community in North Dakota to do so. So that would actually put us a little bit at a disadvantage when we're thinking competitively to Grand Forks to the rest of communities, and even when we're thinking economically as a competitive advantage when you're thinking regionally or other states. This is where we look into a package for it.
Thank you. Is there motions by anybody?
Move approval.
Moved by Crary,
I'll second.
second by Wolf. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Just for the record, Mr. Kavami is online virtually as well. Move on to item number 4, Hive Lease, Meadowlark Aircraft. Mr. Conlon.
Thank you, Chairman Weigel, members of the committee. Recall last year, we were here for second floor authorization of bids for a second floor fit up of the Hive, the former Grand Forks Herald space. Pleased to, I guess, report that project is moving along. Anticipate being substantially completed within the next couple weeks or so. And then we've got those partition walls that we had ordered. Those are on order, looking at a June install. So tonight, though, we're here with the, I guess, the first of what we hope is a few lease requests. This one would be for about 1,280 square feet in the southeast corner of the building. This space was initially formerly occupied by Thread. They've since consolidated into the eastern portion of the building. The other leasable spaces on the second floor involved in our fit up will, involve more partition wall installation, but this one unfortunately does not. And we've got a prospective tenant in Meadowlark Aircraft, who's certainly anxious to get in. I'll break down the financial components of the lease and then have Maggie Brockling come up here and give you a little bit of background about the company. The rate is exactly where we wanted to be when we initially came through for authorization of bids. It's right where we projected we wanted to be at, that $20 a square foot marker, which is, in conversations with the city assessor, deemed to be a reasonable market rate for a space like this. At that 1,280 square feet, that amounts to about $25,600 a year, or about $2,100 a month. At the Hive, we also charge, in lieu of CAM, I guess, $150 per person membership fee. In this case, the company is aiming to start with, I believe, 4 employees, members, which would be, of course, $600 a month, $7,200 a year, and then that would scale or grow as they hire more people. It'd be $150 per head per month as they grow. So we're looking at a 5-year term at that $20 a square foot figure with an annual flat 3% increase. And then there would we're proposing no automatic renewal, just to kind of see where we're at in 5 years from now. So I'll kick it over to Maggie for some background about the company, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Greetings, Growth Fund. I'm Maggie Brockling, Hive Operations Manager. Meadowlark isn't able to attend because they are also at the same event that Aaron Hall is at with the other Grand Forkers. So we have Meadowlark. They are a startup company, and they are focusing on manufacturing of light group 3, which the one that they're working on can lift 100 to 300 pounds at takeoff. Its wingspan is 10 to 14 feet long, so it's quite large and can hold pretty heavy things. And they are organizing their company into 4 operational units: digital engineering and design, aircraft manufacturing and assembly, flight testing and certification, and deployed fleet services. So they're planning to do about 4 aircraft creations a week, and then on surge times, they'll be able to do 10. And the hope is they'll continue to scale their company, and by 2026, they will have 12 to 15 employees working in the Hive, and then a total of 130 other employees working elsewhere in the greater Grand Forks region. So Their director is Ned, and he has hired his first CEO, John Eibel. So they've been already growing within the first few months that they've been here. And they started off as individual members, and now they're looking to grow into an actual suite where they can have walkable space and more of like a focused, quiet work area instead of just bouncing around into the general spaces. So I'm here if you have any questions or need further info.
Thank you.
I move approval.
Motion by Osowski, second by Holth with a comment.
Yeah, just a quick question. Sorry, I know it said no automatic renewals here at the lease, but any options to renew for the tenant? Did they request that? Or
We put initially in the LOI with the tenant, no option to, obviously, with mutual agreement, we could renegotiate the lease. At that time, we didn't want to put in an automatic renewal, one, because we're not sure where the company's going to be at in 5 years, nor where we will be at in terms of how we want to operate the Hive. Perhaps, it makes more sense for another company to be in there, that sort of thing. But obviously, if things are going great with the company and we want them there, they want to be there, we're certainly don't want to close the door to anything like that. We just didn't want to put in an automatic one-sided renewal option in there.
Okay.
May I? Really quick as well. Maggie, do you mind sharing those numbers for employment again? That was-
Yeah, sure. So by summer of 2026, 12 to 15 employees at the Hive, and then in addition to that, 130 employees working elsewhere in the greater Grand Forks region.
Great, cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign, motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to item number 5, past due loan, Amy's Place and Mobile Recon write-off.
Thank you, Chairman Wayo, members of the committee. So back with a similar request that we had a couple months ago pertaining to French Taste, this one for Mobile Recon's legacy EDA RLF loan and then Amy's Place startup loan. We've worked with the city attorney's office on both of these loans, pursuing to the degree that we can collections. Unfortunately, on both fronts, not going to be able to collect on any of the outstanding debt. The details of that are kind of spelled out in your staff report, but on the Mobile Recon side of things, it's they've moved through the bankruptcy process and will have discharged their personal guarantees as part of this, and then the business assets have been deemed well less than sufficient even to cover the private debt, much less our own. So I guess we're recommending in this one, same for Amy's Place, I guess, is that to declare them as uncollectible, so we no longer carry them as receivables on our books. Mobile Recons obviously will discharge them in accordance with the bankruptcy outcomes. And then for Amy's Place, we do want to make clear that, again, we'll write it off of our books so that we're not carrying it as a receivable. That doesn't forgive the loan, though, so should Amy's Place ever come back in good standing, begin operations again, the debt would still remain due and owing. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Gosted, anything to add?
I do. A couple things. One with the Amy's Place, we were in the process of preparing the sum as a complaint, and then came to realize that Amy's Place LLC, which is the only debtor, the only entity that signed off on any of the paper, we didn't get a guarantee or anything like that, dissolved administratively, so I don't even have an entity that exists any longer. And once I came to realize that, it came to, I made the conclusion that it probably didn't make sense to continue to expend fees and time trying to collect on something that I don't even have an entity for. Doesn't mean we couldn't pursue it. There's a 6-year statute of limitations with respect to promissory notes, and if we wanted to, we could always re-engage it. With respect to Mobile Recon, I've been in communication with the attorney for Choice. It has the first priority. They actually went out and reviewed the inventory and the collateral that we would have a security interest in. It's in a second position. They sent me photos. I'd be more than happy to share with the committee photos, but as you might suspect, they're not great photos as to having a ton of value. They did an evaluation. It looked like, from what I understand, it's about $20,000 worth of value. Choice is owed in excess of $450,000. So there's just no way that we'd be able to collect on that note. And again, it was a decision that I made that it didn't make any sense to continue on with that effort against Mobile Recon. In connection, we got personal guarantees from the McDowells. but they filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And the amount of, I was looking at their schedules today, the amount of unsecured debt which we would be in is in excess of $1 million. And there's just no assets, and they got their bankruptcy discharge about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, which was not unexpected. So again, it was kind of my decision not to go forward because we're spending good money after bad to try to pursue these.
Thank you, Mr. Gosted. We'll have a motion by Osowski for staff recommendation, second by Holt. Further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
I move adjournment.
We have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Osowski, second by
Second.
Wolf. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned.
Should we get started, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, April 22nd. Under item 1, call to order 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel. Here. Osowski. Here. Weber.
Here.
Lunsky. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Under item 2, updates and informational items, 2.1, a 2024 transportation projects update. Mr. Grasser, good evening to you.
Good evening, Council President Sandy and the rest of the City Council. We'll do a quick update here on some upcoming items here for this summer and some of the documents that are available here online. I'm going to actually scroll back up to the top. On the website, we have a couple of maps that we're going to be producing. One we already have up. This map here, I'm just going to scroll over it, not really go over anything, but it's a map of all the construction activities that are going on. I shouldn't say all. There's always something that's missing at the time. These are really the construction projects that are going on in the city of Grand Forks that the department has been involved in, or other city departments have been involved in, including the DOT. Long list. They are in color. They're noted, and if you go to the side, why am I not all the way? There we go. I can pull it, I guess. Anyway, on the side, there's also a listing there of the specific projects. You can correlate that back to the map. The one I really wanted to talk to about tonight was more the map that shows some more of the specific construction impacts, the more significant impacts that we're going to have over the weekend or over the summer. You'll see there's a couple of different colors in here. There's blue and there's red. The blue items are areas that are under the control, design, construction of the North Dakota DOT. The red are projects that are under the basically bid and construction of the city of Grand Forks. You'll see on here we did show some graphics. In this case, the 2 arrows indicate that it's a project where they're intending to maintain two-way traffic through the course of the project. The X's are where you might have actually a full closure. And again, none of this stuff is 100% all the time, but we're trying to give an idea of the impacts. And this map is really showing those areas that are significant enough volume that are going to impact a fair amount of folks. The first one, I'll just go through a couple of them. I'm not going to go through everything on the list, but I'll go through a couple of them here. The first one is South Washington Underpass. That one, you can see there's barrels out there already. That was actually supposed to, original schedule would have started that this Monday. They have since moved it back a week till next Monday, which is a bit of a lead-in. We've gotten everybody, all the contractors and other consultants and DOT pretty well up to speed to use our info center for notifying when closures are happening. That's really the best source because, as I just indicated, these things changed almost day by day. If I'd have given this presentation last week, I would have told you that Washington would have been closed today, and it's not. So they're looking at another week from now. That project will be a multi-year project, 2 years, and they are looking at keeping one lane open, but that is going to be a significant traffic disruptor into the system. The other one that I wanted to note is over here on Columbia Road. The Columbia Road overpass, that project will probably start later this summer. We'll call it July. That also will be a multi-year project. The work this year is intended to keep traffic open one lane each direction. But again, significant traffic disruptor there. 32nd Avenue South. You remember last year they did the overlay work. This year they're coming back and doing the concrete work. I'll just say it's a significant traffic disruptor there too. If you remember what the traffic control, things will look fairly similar this year probably. These round circles, these open circles are traffic signal rehab and/or replacement projects. There's a couple of red ones there. Those are the under the city control that didn't get done last year. We'll be picking them up very soon. We're trying to coordinate some of that work with, for instance, on 42nd, we're trying to coordinate that with UND relative to holding that off until after graduation and stuff when they have significant events going on. I would like to have started this work on Columbia Road just so we can get it out of the way, but we're having some problems with delivery of signals. All of these, the blue and the red, the plan now is to bring in those temporary portable signals. I think you've all seen them. They're mounted on a trailer and they sit up there. That's, I think, a significant improvement. If you remember last year, some of that was a bit of a learning curve. The amount of time they had to take the signals down to get them sandblasted and repaired and brought back up was longer than was planned. And so, and when those lanes are restricted, they were significant impacts on traffic. These portable signals, they're still not going to work perfectly because you can't put them into synchronization like the full signals will. But we'll be able to keep more lanes open and more turn lanes open for each of those projects. It's a considerable expense, but I think it's well worth it to try to minimize the impacts to the traveling public. These things will be intermittent. They'll work on a couple here and there, and then, they may move someplace else. So again, watch, for the specific announcements from the info center relative to, which intersection they're working on. I can't tell you which ones they're going to be working on today because, it's going to be a work in progress. And each one may have, some may go down for only a couple of weeks, some may be down for at least a full month. I'll probably mention this item here in the downtown area, Belmont and Fifth. That intersection improvement we're going to be putting in a roundabout in there. To do that work, you just can't maintain two-way traffic when you're doing that work. It'll all be tore up, and that'll be a full closure during, for at least a couple of months here later on this summer. And the last one 40th Avenue South, that's a local street reconstruction. That'll be closed to through traffic, but we'll be maintaining local traffic, temporary roads and things to get people in and out. Box culvert on Washington. We did most of the work last year, but we couldn't get the pedestrian box culvert. You just couldn't get it last year in time, so that work got deferred. We left a segment out there that's asphalt with the idea, knowing we're going to have to, pull it back out to put the box culvert. When that work goes in, again, that's work that's just not possible to do with two-way traffic, so there'll be a closure on that one again. Also, we are coordinating that. We're trying to fit it in between a local business and their landscaping and the rural need to get trucks down there for potatoes and sugar beets. That's all I'm going to go through on this one, unless there's specific questions.
Any specific questions for Mr. Grassner?
If I may.
Mr. Weber.
Thanks.
Vice President Weber.
Mr. Grasser, 32nd Avenue, I probably should be aware of this, and I apologize if I've missed something. I remember we had the bid that just came in way over the top, and so we had to do some stopgap measures last year. We're going in and doing that full job this year. And how did the bids work out this time? Or are we waiting for those bids? Where are we at on that?
32nd, help me out. Did we? Not sure about that one right off the top, but it's in the queue. The DOT is going to end up doing it. Our share on that is going to be 10%. So if and when we have to do any adjustments to that on the budget, but because of the extent of that in the DOT's requirements, you may be working in a relatively small area, but the traffic control to manage the traffic through that extends a long ways. So, there's going to be, like last year, it's going to be, there'll be various traffic controls on there from the interstate all the way to Washington Street.
And once that's all done, we'll resynchronize those lights, or are they currently synchronized?
Yes. Yeah, well, they're currently synchronized, but they'll need to be On these major corridors, we try to go in every couple of years, and we actually do a full resynchronization we look at the current traffic patterns that happen to exist because things change over time. And so just be aware, I mean, that is something we would normally do anyway, especially after a large construction project like this. We'll go back and double check.
Very good. And then over the last several weeks, we've had to approve some budget amendments for projects that were coming in, supported that. But in previous years, this is often a pothole season.
Yep.
And we had a relatively gentle pothole season, it seems. Plus, our roads are in better shape. We've been able to fix things up. Is there an anticipated savings from pothole season this year that will be of any significance, or is that yet to be determined?
Maybe the savings is from not having an unanticipated expense, if you can count that as a savings.
All right,
The potholes, a lot of the areas, I mean, we don't have the urgency that we would have otherwise had like last year. And that's why the DOT moved ahead. They were concerned about the bids last year, but that's why they moved ahead and did the asphalt last year. We basically just couldn't tolerate another year of that.
Right.
But general, our whole system has a general need for pothole repair, and that happens, irregardless of the high-profile location like this.
Very good. Those are slightly off topic. Thanks for letting me ask. Thank
Well, I
you.
have two more pieces in here that's a little bit off topic too, but I
Mr.
want
Grasser, could I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Are we trying to keep the renovations of the underpass and the overpass to different times, or are we going to have two of our essentially 4 north-south connectors with limited traffic at the same time?
Exactly what you said.
Yikes.
That's why we're doing this this is more than what we would normally do, but, people are going to ask for patience because there is going to be a significant, at one time, we tried to deconflict these things, but budget constraints, for instance, the Washington underpass should have been started 2 years ago, should have been done by this year. Various reasons, it ended up this year at the same time as when the Columbia Road overpass was programmed. So despite sometimes your best efforts, there's just extraneous things and unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that's happening to be coming together this year.
We need to do a lot of messaging to the general public. You're right. We need to start prepping people today to be patient because it's going to be a mess.
Yeah, this is step number one. We can come back and do some of these updates periodically.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Mr. V.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Sandy. I was going to probably say something very similar to what you do because of all the major corridors, all the major ones, there's something like 17th is considered fairly, maybe not as much as Washington or Gateway Drive. They're all under construction at the same time. Even though 32nd is continuous, Demers and Washington, all those intersections are going to have to get usually go from 2 to 1 lane in each direction because you're working on each signal light. So you're going to have all of Gateway Drive all the way from Interstate or 42nd to the west to the river. And Demers is going to be from 34th, it looks like, all the way at least past Washington. 32nd, I mean, every one of those is. And then you go the north-south, especially with the two, like you just said, Columbia Road and underpass of Washington. There's probably not a way to go around any of it because it's going to be all impacted.
And I think engineering staff will verify that it has caused me a great deal of consternation as I've seen this stuff develop over the last year.
Well,
it is
we'll get
what
it over
is.
with, but it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be, yeah, you're going to feel like you're bumping from one project into the other, and I get it. You're going to try to get around some of these projects by jumping on the interstate. You can go down to the interstate and try to get off on 32nd to get back in queue, and guess what? You're going to happen. You're going to run right into the construction traffic on 32nd. And anyway, again, patience and forewarning. I did want to mention two things that are a little off topic. They're not actually construction this year, but an update on the 47th Avenue South interchange. Actually, a big milestone we just heard about today. Federal Highway has accepted the interstate justification report, and that's a very critical element in Federal Highway accepting the arguments to install an interchange, and puts us into queue then to start the actual funding and, project development and eventually into construction. And those aren't given, when we did our actions here, those aren't, they look at it from under a different lens. They're looking at, how does this impact the interstate? How does this improve capacity on the interstate? So that was that was a big deal. We just found out about that today, so that's good. Their next step they'll go out and start soliciting professional services to help supplement whatever they want to do on that. The DOT is leading that effort. The other one, 42nd underpass, that one is also in process. That one is switched over from Federal Highway, FHWA, into FRA, which is a Federal Railroad Association administration. That has to do with the fact the grant is coming back through the railroad folks. It sounds easy. They both got F's and stuff in their name and A's and whatever, but they act a little bit differently. Things have been going really well, though, so far. They are in the process. They've selected Bolton and Mink as being the design engineer for the project, and they'll start that. They're in the process right now of reviewing scope and negotiating fees that would go along with that scope. So once they do that, the engineers will actually start getting into some of the more tangible. So we're making progress. It's slow, but things are moving ahead. And again, the DOT is coordinating that for us with FRA and Federal Highway. So the other component here tonight, sorry, am I okay to move on to?
Yeah, well, read in item 2.2.
Thank you.
South End
I'm taking way longer than I was planning, but.
Yeah, South End Interior Flood Protection Master Planning Update.
Yeah, so just a quick reminder, we've been working on this thing for probably a year. What I'm going to give you tonight is super abbreviated. It may not feel like it, but it's really abbreviated compared to for all the efforts and things that have been investigated in the whole process. I did want to recognize our team on this one. We did hire AE2S to put together the modeling and things like that. I think Sean Gaddy is in the audience. Linda Severson is online. Internally, we have Ed Lieberman and Christian Danielson that have been working on this, again, as a team effort. And I just want to recognize everybody that, this isn't everybody, but some of the main players that are here tonight. A little bit of background on this is going to focus mainly on the South End Drainway, and the South End Drainway is something that we started actually before the flood of '97. It was constructed in I must say the early '90s. A different world back then, so kind of remember when you're wondering what the heck is going on here. Back in those days, the 100-year flood was a little over 50 feet. I think it was like 50 and a half or something like that. The rainfall events were smaller. We weren't worried about some of the things that we're having to deal with today, because at the river at 50 and a half feet, almost all the property in Grand Forks, other than low-lying areas, were above the 100-year floodplain. Makes a big difference as we discuss and how things move forward. If you just accept that as a statement of fact, and I won't try to tie the threads together as to all the permutations of what that means, but when the Corps came in, they used the South End Drainway. We expanded the South End Drainway right after the flood, and the Corps used that as a mechanism to transport water to the river, and then when it gets to the river, there's a pump station that pumps the water out. Rather delicate balance, because what happened when the Corps does that is they're sizing the pump station such that they're looking at the drainway, in this case the drainway, filling up. And the pumps start, and they don't keep up with the water. So the drainway keeps filling and filling and filling. And what they do is they size the pump to match the holding capacity of the drainway at the maximum acceptable elevation that they have for flood protection, and which isn't necessarily defined the same way we would do it. So it's a delicate balance, and that's part of what we're dealing with now is it's kind of tricky timing. Okay, you're going up and up and up, and then you're supposed to hit a max, and then you're supposed to come down. Maybe that'll make more sense as I go or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, this goes back to 2022. The spring flood was really, we call it a shot across the bow, because what happened with that event, between the rain and the melting, we were getting substantially more flooding than we were anticipating for the event that was actually occurring. These are some of the pictures that we talked, and we presented on this, I think, back in 2022. I won't go into a whole lot of it, but water was high and water was ponding, and we said this wasn't supposed to happen during that event. This overview here, I'll just review quick some of the evaluations, need for action, some of the components of the drainway, recommended plan, alternatives considered. And I want to tell you up front, we got some good news. I think we can really leverage that south end drainway to perform way beyond what it was originally designed for. And part of that has to do with the fact that in the meantime, we've had to develop stormwater holding ponds, and the Corps didn't have that into their original design, so nobody did at the time. And so those holding ponds are a mechanism where we can really leverage what that south end drainway can do. So just a quick review of existing conditions. This is a computer-generated model of what will happen during a 100-year storm event. Lots of red on here. I'll tell you, don't worry so much about the rural areas, all the red out there. I mean, certainly on a big rain, you're going to get ponding in the field. As we develop that ponding, we'll end up essentially getting incorporated into stormwater holding ponds and stuff. So you can see when we get into the developed areas of town, we have less aerial extents of flooding, but it does show, the red shows that we are having extensive flooding in the streets. And so that is an area that's of concern that we need to deal with. This map is during a summer rainfall event. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But there are locations in here where we have enough high water. We're concerned about impacts to private property and what FEMA might do with future flood insurance. So this is a pictorial of the south end drainway, the flood protection. Again, you can see there's a common leg that goes at about 50th Avenue South, and there's a leg that goes north, ties up to the interstate, and then there's a leg south. That was originally intended to go to the interstate, but when the Corps came in, you can see they put a pond right there where the drainway is. And not that we can't extend it to the interstate, but that really is going to serve a lot of the purpose of what that drainway would have provided. There are some outside holding ponds out here to capture and retain some of the rural water. Again, the Corps, when they're looking at things, they're looking at, where does ponding start actually impacting a structure, which is an easier bar to meet than some of what we're looking at. Again, I talked about the pump station. Here's the pump station is right here on basically off of Belmont Road, and it operates as I had previously discussed. So what kind of changed from the original study? Based on the observations and studies to date, we are looking at expanding the service area. That's only a peripheral additional benefit, but what's really changed is rainfall events have changed. They've gotten more intense earlier and larger. Development density has changed. We've got a lot more dense development, which drives peak flows. And we have better modeling tools. You got to remember when these things were designed, it was almost 30 years ago that they were doing these. And think of what your technology was 30 years ago, your cell phone, if you even had one back then, and computer programming, what that looked like. It's come a long ways. I'll just touch on each one very, very briefly. So the components of the south end drainway, the original design service area was outlined there in red. The red perimeter. It was originally envisioned that those southerly points would go into drain 4. Just it seemed to be convenient at that time and didn't have the complexities that we're seeing today. That'll have some permutations later on in the discussion when we talk about maybe, some of the financial, what do we do with bringing players into that service area. Our master plan that we have brings those areas into the south end drainway, and again, the entire plan allows that to happen, which means we don't impact the legal drain. There's a lot of concerns with the legal drain, even as it sits today with the rural folks. And the flooding that occurs, I mean, it impacts literally millions of dollars worth of crops when Drain 4 isn't able to evacuate that water as quick. And they have the same problem we have, which we'll talk about constipation maybe as it relates to a drainway. I'll let you think about that for a bit. So existing conditions, we talked about the rainfall. So just on the left-hand side, we talked about the original design for the South End Rainway was about a 4-inch rainfall event, which was a 25-year event. When the flood system was developed and the Corps was developing, they were designing for 100-year rainfall events. And at the time, that was closer to about a 5-inch event. Now, with Atlas 14, that's the latest National Weather Service data sources, we're now talking more like a 6-inch event. And we're not sure what the future might bring, so we'd like to have a little bit of redundancy in the whole process on that too. So again, we're dealing with more rain, more intense rain, and different timings of the rain. We talked about density. The original Corps plan was a little more reflective of a bit more of a rural situation. You can see in there, imagine there, that a lot of it is grass. You got very little impervious surface relative to the whole area development. There's also dips and crannies and stuff like that that will trap water. So water on a situation like that runs off a little slower and gets attenuated. And you can see, as areas have developed, switching all the way to the right-hand side, what we're seeing here is at least some areas of town we're having pretty intensive development. You can see the homes and the driveways, concrete relative to just the space there. That means you're going to have more water and you're going to have it quicker. Now the computer modeling folks, they talk about a hydrograph, which is how the water is running off of a piece of ground. And if you can envision on a grass surface, a rainfall event it'll come out, it'll have kind of a gradual tail, it'll peak up and then it'll come back down. When you put the impervious, what happens that same rainfall event, that'll take this crest, it'll shoot it way up and then it'll come back down. But in the meantime, you're flooding then with all that additional water. That additional water has to go someplace. So that's why it's important on the impervious surface piece of it. Again, it brings the water in faster and it brings it in at a much higher volume. And you'll see some more references to that again later on too. We did talk about computer modeling. This one is a very sophisticated model. You can see that the entire drainage basin has been modeled, including the catch basins. That's been overlaid with the LiDAR information that's available online, which really gives you that. Remember that the image that had all the red on it? That was basically the computer model overlaid on the LiDAR, showing where the flooding is actually occurring. Some unique conditions we've discovered on the South End Rainway. That March and April event with a frozen ground has a much greater risk than previously known. We go back to what the Corps did when they did their design is they looked at the 100-year event that would occur at the time that you would normally have high water on the river, which means I'll call it early to mid, call it the month of April. You're not going to typically get that 6-inch rain during the month of April. So they went through an analysis of what the risks were, what was that 100-year event, and I'm going to call it I think it was about 2 or 3 inches is what they expected to happen that time of year. What we saw in 2022, we should have, that water was coming quicker to us from the rural areas because of the rainfall event and the melt that was going on at the same time. We were just ready to shut down the gates on the South End Drainway during that particular flood fight. And that water, I think that was coming in to the drainway would have come in much faster than the system was designed to handle originally. So that's the risk, is we're having more water quicker, earlier. We did, going back to this, we did confirm that those risks will tend to decrease over time as we build and add ponds. That risk will tend to go away. Again, some of the growth decreases some of our exposure, for lack of a better term.
So a development like Grand Valley with all the extra impervious surface, but because of the extra holding ponds, you're saying a development like that actually reduces our risk. Okay.
Thank you. It's a perfect lead into item number 3. We've known, or we thought we knew for a couple of years here, that we looked at development along with CPS did the original perimeter drainage study, Mike Corman. And we've recognized when we looked at the what limited computer modeling we did, and we looked at the elevations in the south end drainway, we could see that they weren't matching. And so we did I'll call it a reconnaissance level evaluation of what do we need to do to keep the drainway from flooding too badly. And actually that came up with the Grand Valley design. Mr. Corman incorporated to the best computer model that they had at the time and oversized that compared to what our normal development was, because it was going to have such an impact on 2/4 of land. It was super good planning, and the developer cooperated, et cetera, but sometimes we'll actually refer to Grand Valley as kind of our model moving forward. It's not quite, but we kind of call it a Grand Valley model. We also found out item number 4, interestingly enough, the problems on the south end drainway were really more over by the Discovery Elementary area. Even when we tried to cut off flows from that area, we still had trouble, which drove me a little bit crazy. This is a pictorial of what I'm talking about. We found out that the problems in the south end drainway are mainly on that northerly east-west run. As you go farther downstream, the ditch gets a little bit bigger, and et cetera. And anyway, there gets to be more capacity. It's not choked up like it is here, constipated. You can see on this the reason for that is when we've got areas that are contributing into the south end drainway that are flushing large amounts of water. They were developed before the need for a pond. And that's why the ponding is so important. You can see on some of these on the west end, on north, 141 CFS, 150 CFS, 110 CFS. Wow, that's a lot of water. I mean, these are pipes like this just blasting into the drainway. Same thing happens, we have a similar situation on the east side of Columbia Road. You can see that 338 CFS. Again, you got all this water pounding into the drainway. And timing is an issue. I equate it, I look at it and I say, some of these surrounding areas, it would be like if you're trying to get into the drainway and you're going at it at a jog. It's not going to take you very long to get there, right? It's only a quarter mile, maybe half a mile, some of these. The drainway itself is running at a slow walk. And so you got this water trying to get in here and the drainway can't get out. And it's because of the flat grades that we have, basically. And so the drainway to a large extent acts like a pond instead of we tried to increase the flow in the drainway and just weren't having any success. And we found out it's just because you can't. It's just so flat. It's not like it's kind of counterintuitive. You think you could make that slope happen better. And we probably could if we were starting all over again. Again, you can see some of the difference. If you look on the south side, like 49 CFS, that's taking into an area equal to, if not more than the area to the north. It's about a third of the flow. And so you can see how the impacts that the ponds are having in reducing the flow. It also reduces the timing when those flows get there. Unfortunately, by the time those flows get there, the whole area is basically all choked up already from all the other water coming in. And that's why we couldn't really solve it by eliminating or reducing water only here. We have 2 problem areas, basically one area west of Columbia Road and one area east of Columbia Road. So this is maybe a little more graphic about with current regulations, if we don't change anything the way we're at, this is the kind of flooding that we're going to have. Think of it as a little bit of a blow up of the big red, the map, the image with all the red on it. This shows a typical street, roughly 1.5 foot of flooding, and the problem with that is kind of twofold. One is then when we have these events, we're not going to be able to get emergency vehicles through it. And as these things pond up and they start getting onto private property, you can risk flooding private property, and you can also trigger FEMA. We're afraid that when they come in there, if they see flood waters touching private property, that may trigger a FEMA flood insurance requirement and reaction. So now, not to confuse the issue, but there's 2 different kinds of flooding going on here. This is a translation of what the water would be in the drainway. That's not to say that we're not going to flood streets during other events. When you have we've all seen it, when we have a rain event in Grand Forks, you get an intense runoff. The water has to get into the catch basins. It's got to go through the pipes. we only design our system for generally a 5-year event or maybe a 10-year event tops on the classified streets. What that means is events higher than that are going to pond in the street. Those are shorter-term ponding issues that are going to drain away. This is a little more longer-term. It's like even after that event gets out, you won't notice it because you're going to be backing up from the drainway. So I just wanted to make sure people don't get confused later on going, well, I still see flooding in the street even after we implement your plan. If the drainway was dry and you had a hard event, you're going to flood in the streets if it's, exceeds the capacity of the street. Gotta take a breath here. So some of the key considerations for the alternatives, obviously we want to minimize cost. There are some things that really just didn't seem to be viable from an implementation standpoint. So we looked at that. We also wanted to minimize long-term O&M. As a government entity, that's really what kills you is these long-term labor costs that just keep growing and adding. So you want to minimize O&M. And we did want to minimize property acquisition because taking property away is property that can be developed. Some of the things we looked at just trying to pump our way out of the problem. We could pump some of this west end down into Washington and get away with and try to move that water essentially faster than it would go into the drainway. I won't get into all the details. We dropped that after a concept review. We just couldn't get the pipes and the pumps big enough to really make it work. We looked at a new direct outlet to the river. Again, now you're trying to improve things from basically the interstate all the way down to the river. You're potentially bringing water into the river that might have questions about, flood elevations and things like that. Same thing with Legal Drain 4. You looked at you'd have to be developing that drain all the way out to the river, getting the water to the drain for the first place, and then trying to take it. It kind of quickly became apparent that wasn't going to be very implementable and was going to have very high cost to it. So number 2 and 3, somewhat together, we understood when we looked at it. Remember we talked about when the gates are closed, one of the things that we also need to have there is additional storage under the gates closed. We looked at the storage we need during the summer event and with the gates closed. Storage seemed to be a fixture of the flood storage. Long story short, when we started looking at that, if you need storage anyway, you might as well have a little more and solve both problems instead of only one. It really kind of became a slam dunk. It's a question of how much and where. We did look at putting in new infill ponds, in other words, building brand new ponds someplace, but again, some of these problem areas are areas we've already got a lot of development occurring. Didn't want to recommend that. That was low on our priority list. We're not recommending that in our final solution. What we are coming in with here are the next 2 bullet points. We are looking at it, and there'll be an image on this a little later that'll explain it a little better, but we are looking at expanding some of the existing ponds. So in other words, can we create storage within property that we already own that we don't have to take, new property out of potential sales or production? And that's really where we're going. We found out we can go a long ways by expanding. We make them much more utilitarian than they currently are, but we can gain storage out of some of the ponds we already have. And then that's more or less, if you think about that in terms of trying to offset the storage we would have otherwise had in the older development areas that didn't have ponds. In addition to that, we can't get the water level down in the south end drainway with some additional, I call it flood remediation storage. That means another pond or some additional storage in there to help offset that. That gets confusing. I was worried about how that's going to come across in this presentation, but they're similar but different. And then item 4, we always have recognized for a while we need additional system storage in the new development. That helps correct the problems that are out there, and it also helps keep our system in compliance with the flood protection. This one is a little bit tricky. I'm going to really point on our base solution. We talked about having additional storage in new developments. We need about 45 acre-feet per quarter section. What I really want to point to is the next 2 bullet points. What we're talking about by expanding the 4 existing service ponds is about $1 million for that construction. And then there's an unused crossing really by Discovery Middle School that causes 2 problems. One, it's got a small pipe, puts some hydraulic head, and it also just takes up space in the drainway that we could otherwise use. So we're talking about taking that out. Those two things together is about $1 million. The area in green, again, a little difficult to explain, but we're looking at that flood acre, the flood overflow storage, about 30 acre feet. To do that, we need a pond that's probably in the neighborhood of about 4 acres of footprint. That cost we think we can do that for under $1 million. Just to give a sense, this is a comparison of a large pump station. And I hesitate on this one because we looked at a 60 cubic feet per second station. It didn't solve the problem, so it's not really even a fair comparison. Even one station of this size doesn't solve the problem. But you can see just order of magnitude on that. That pump station and force main would be in the neighborhood of $15 to $25 million. Again, it made the decision like, okay, we just can't, pumping just isn't going to work. It's just not cost effective. Pumps are expensive to maintain and operate over time. So again, this just gives a sense that, it wasn't a neck and neck decision on pumping and storage. I mean, it was, in my mind, I think it was pretty much a blowout. So again, our recommended plan is.
Mr. Grasser?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, sir. Quick
Speakers
question.
throw me off over.
Yeah, sorry about that. Quick question. If you go back to the previous slide.
Yep.
You're talking 45, that for future developments, 45 acre feet of storage.
Per quarter.
Per quarter section.
Yep.
What are we at today?
Let me get to that.
Okay, go on.
I have a
Thank you.
slide that I think will answer that.
Okay.
Because that is one of the things we need to recognize and a solution we need to work for. So again, our recommendation is for storage focus. Again, it helps both in the summer events and the spring event. Seems like we needed storage no matter which way we tried to turn this thing, we needed some storage. There's some immediate benefits from that. It doesn't solve all of our existing risks because we talked about some of our existing risks we'll have to build our way out of as we develop. This is the one I wanted to talk to. This is an image of what we're talking about doing. These are the 4 ponds that are in that general vicinity. We're looking at expanding those. The benefit of those, they're very close to the drainway, so hydraulically they're going to be able to peel that water off pretty efficiently. Some of that excess water that, to offset earlier developments. And then there's 30 acre foot pond. We were looking at trying to get into some of the undeveloped area on the west side. That's a rough graphic of what that pond would be. What we didn't show in here though is where I actually want to go, which I think we can do some of that on the west end by widening the drainway and not actually having to build a separate pond. But we do need to talk with the property owners and figure out which alternative might fit best within their subdivisions. I think they're going to like the ditch widening option. President Sandy, this is kind of getting to where your question was. We are looking at oversizing. The image on the left, we talk about, this would be a more or less typical pond in our development area, again, on a per quarter section basis. We did talk, because it is confusing when we talk volumes. Bottom line, a pond to serve the area under our current design criteria is probably going to be a little over 4.5 acres. That's the footprint. Under the new recommendation of 45 acre feet per quarter, it's going to grow to about 5.6 acres. So there's about a 20% or a little better increase in the footprint. And I think that's we'll touch on that on later slides, that some of the things I think we need to figure out how to offset those things or neutralize those. The image on the right just shows, when the whole area is developed, nothing new in here. All the quarters have always needed ponds. It's just, it doesn't say that this is where the pond will actually go. This is just recognizing that, we'll be building ponds as we develop south. Some financial implications on that. As I look into my crystal ball, I think we need to figure out how to adjust cost participation areas. We have areas that are going to benefit from the south end drainway that aren't in the south end drainway tapping fee. I think we need to talk about that to make sure, everybody has some. Those that have already paid, I guess that's the way life runs. But in the future areas, I think we might want to expand that tapping to recognize there's going to be benefiting areas. I think we want to talk about adjusting the city cost share for ponds, considering the flood reduction component. And because I consider, my thoughts on this one, I'm just giving you my thoughts. This is really almost a maintenance item to keep our flood protection system operating I think it's a flood protection issue. If we were designing the projects today, the Corps would have added additional ponds. That would have been part of our additional costs of our flood protection system. So I'm dropping hints here. We'll come back on some of this, not even all in this presentation. We do, on the financial side though, we do need to talk about funding for near-term implementation. Expanding those 4 existing ponds in the remediation storage is something I'd like to see happening here in the next year or two, actually under construction. So something we need to figure out. And I think we have some dollars in our flood kitty, so to speak, to do some of that stuff. I would not envision those being special assessed, and I don't want to, that's up to the city council. So when I say some things, I recognize there's limitation. I'm just telling you what my thoughts are. The other thing, we want to basically agree as to what our approach is going to be and develop a general plan, because some of the things that we're talking about, I think, are going to be potentially available for some state cost sharing. They do have some cost shares on flood protection. We'll have to work at it a little bit. It doesn't fit all the cubby holes exactly perfectly, but I think once we have a plan in place, we can talk to the state about some cost sharing. So the next step, what you're going to see as city council, beyond just basically approving this, or discussing or approving, assuming you approve this plan, we do need to modify our stormwater design guidelines. That tells the developer the conditions, how we're going to develop. This will only be in this particular area, I think, at this point in time. But we'll develop those guidelines and bring them back to city council for approval. Again, designing the near-term modifications, probably have a discussion here during the budgeting sessions, and I would like to see those things designed here and bid yet maybe this fall for construction next spring. Collaborating with property owners on the implementation approach, that's where we talked about, do we put a pond in there? Do we widen the drainway? That's, that should happen pretty much immediately upon an agreement as to, that this is the right approach, or unless we want to try a different approach. And again, then some policy plan and financial changes. I'm getting to the end. So when we talked about, remember the other image that we had that had all the flooding on the street. So really what we're trying to our goal that we're trying to accomplish is to get any of that street flooding down to about a 6-inch maximum depth at the catch basin. When you do that, the center line of the road is generally going to be roughly at about that same elevation. You can get emergency vehicles through there. It's not full operation, but you can get emergency vehicles through there. You can see on this image that the flooding is contained within the city right-of-way. So we're not touching private property, which could trigger that potential flood insurance issue. So that's how we those were our targets. Those were our goals that we were trying to accomplish with the project, and as we set our design or alternative considerations. And hopefully in the end, instead of that slide with all the red on it, we're going to end up with something like this, where the blue is contained within the drainway and ponds. Very, very minimal ponding on the streets. We've greatly reduced the scope of that flooding. Questions?
Mr. Grasser, thank you for that condensed presentation. That was nice of you. Yes. Ms. Osowski, comment?
Yeah, not a question. I think Mr. Grasser did a wonderful job. I think one of the most serious threats to our city is flooding, and I think it's very important. All this is very important. I believe a couple weeks ago, we had to approve I don't know if there are budget amendments or what, to go fix the flood wall, correct? And now it looks like we have a pretty big project on our hands to control our city flooding, which I think is super important. Now, my comment is it's concerning to me when we're sitting here talking about this funding and funding our flood wall. Well, we send the Greenway party people out to try to get funding from the state to use our flood protection money to build on that side of the dike. So I just think really our flood protection money should be used for flood protection. I think this is all great, and this is where our money should go, not towards trying to spend millions of dollars to put on that side of our flood wall. So, thank you, Mr. Grasser. You did an excellent job.
Thank you. My only comment is it does remind me a little bit when we had original flood projects trying to figure out how to fund all the different things that all the needs. And recreation is a need I think we've got, and I'm not arguing against, please don't take me that way. It's a difficult decision, and council will have to kind of look through some of that. I agree.
I think that our flood protection
I'm glad I
for
don't have
our
to
city
decide.
is more important than putting, a warming house somewhere where it's going to have to be removed and replaced. And I just think that our flood protection fund should go towards our flood protection and not spicing up that side of the flood wall. So, thank you.
If I can too, I think, just to make sure, I think all of the city staff, engineering, public works, our primary focus is maintaining that system and the protection. There's no question about that. And so just
I just
rest
want to make
assured
sure you
we're-
have funding to
we're
protect
not
us.
looking the other way.
Mr. Veen, yes, sir?
Yeah, Mr. Grasser, thank you again. That was very good. You obviously looked at the impacts of these summer rainfall events and the increase of some of these events with the runoff on the south end drainway. What's the impacts for the rest of the community as you go further north? Is there also things that need to be studied and changes in drainage elevations through the rest of the city?
Well, remind you that the original scope of this really had, we looked at it as having two parts. Really, right now, I think it's going to have three. We talked about the drainage basin of the south end drainway. We tackled that one because, believe it or not, this is the easier one to solve. It's going to have the shorter presentation. The bigger problem is going to be on the English Coulee because that's a much larger basin. There's much more existing developed area there that isn't going into ponding, right? It wasn't a requirement back when that happened. We're also seeing then that that's kind of that internal piece, and there's the external piece. One of the things that we think we're learning now is that we can't solve the inside piece by cutting off the outside piece. The inside has some of its own almost standalone issues. That's not to say they aren't interconnected, but I hate to leave you with that big of a question, but that's going to be a part of my goal in managing the project. I'd like to get this one under our belt and move on because, quite frankly, the English Coulee is going to be a tougher nut to crack.
Well, in the past, the railroad bridge and the English Coulee.
Yep.
Sorry, in the past, the railroad bridge at the English Coulee has been an issue. I would assume that's not gone away.
That's one of our restriction points. Yep.
Further comments? I think ultimately, we need to keep in mind that this is going to cost homeowners more money, not current homeowners, but future developments. The cost of land will just be going up for all new construction. So I think anything that we can do utilizing our current flood protection money to keep the cost down for developers is important.
And that's great feedback. We can start to tailor some of our future planning efforts to comments like that. There's a lot of different ways we can go, and I, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Great presentation.
Thank you.
On to discussion items. Item 3.1, application for Class 3 on and off sale beer and wine license from RG Investments. Ms. Lundmark, good evening.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. We are in receipt of an application for a Class 3 beer and wine license from RG Investments, Inc., who will do business as Cookies Lounge. This is proposed to go into the old former La Cantina space, formerly El Rocco before that. This lounge the La Cantina space is going to be subdivided into two separate businesses. This would be the business on the west side of that space. Small 21 plus beer and wine. They will have gaming there from Development Homes, which they're affiliated with, and limited food, frozen pizza apps, typical bar type fare and looking to open approximately July 1.
I move approval.
So motion by Osowski. Is there a second? By Weigel. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3.2, committee appointment and reappointment for the library board. I think we should take these separately, perhaps? Is there a motion to move Ms. Ronkowski to the library board for?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Kavami.
I have a question. Are we voting on both the people, or we divided them?
Yeah, we just separated them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. So this is a motion and a second to reappoint Becky Ronkowski to the library board. Further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
Motion carries with Osowski and Sandy dissenting. Is there a motion for Pat Trainer,
I move approval.
or Paul Trainer, sorry, thank you. Moved by Osowski, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.3, plans and specs for Project 8839 Downtown Alley Reconstruction. Mr. Danielson.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So this project is reconstructing the alley right here behind the Franklin on 4th development. If we go back a couple years to 2022, as part of the coordination with that development, Xcel Energy took the overhead power in that alley along with all of the telecommunication companies and moved it underground. At the same time, because they were ripping up some of the alley to do that work, we recognized that that alley could use some better drainage, so we went in and put some storm sewer in that alley. Once all that work was done, we filled the alley back in with gravel, recognizing that this development was going to have some heavy traffic on the alley as they were building out the building. We didn't want to put a brand new alley back in there, have them drive all the heavy traffic over it, and then just ruin the infrastructure investment that we'd put into it, so we decided to wait on the paving. This project is getting back to it now. The developer has indicated to us that sometime this summer, the traffic on the alley there will start to taper off a little bit. So we're seeing this as a good time to get in there and get the alley in. So this project is just proposed to go in there, pave the alley, and it's a pretty straightforward project. We're estimating it'll cost about $150,000 and proposing that it come out of 4815, the Street and Infrastructure Fund. This project is expected to be bid here probably in the next month or so, but right now we're just looking for approval of plans and specs for the project.
One question, Ms. Osowski?
Do you get special assessed for alleys?
So our current policy does not have anything listed for alleys. It's kind of a gray zone in all of our policy. We don't have an actual policy when it comes to alleys, when it comes to special assessments. They have been assessed in the past, but this one is not being proposed to be assessed.
I guess I would like to see that in the future, like maybe some guidelines on that, and just make sure that we're treating our property owners fair across the board throughout the city. I mean, I'll move approval, but I do think that there should be something looked at for alleys, if there isn't any, so.
Moved by Osowski. Is there a second by Veen? Thank you. Further comments?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Veen?
Just a quick question. I think it's a great project. I love hearing the fact that you're burying this infrastructure so you don't have all those overhead wires. And Xcel Energy and Power is probably one of the biggest and most important to do. How is this going to influence, or how are we going to continue to go to the south? I mean, are we going to get more and more of this done? Is there a policy for doing that? Is Xcel coming forth with any funding for this type of thing, or are there any grants available for continuation of this?
So Councilmember Veen, good question. This one was initiated by, I don't want to say just the developer, but the developer had a desire to get the electrical and those wires out of the overhead setup in the alley. So Xcel actually took that request and then buried it. In some situations, it seems like Xcel will put the financial burden of that back on the developer, but in this one, they were gracious enough to take on that burden themselves. At the time of coordinating all of that, the question came up of, how far do we go to the south? At the time, there wasn't a desire to go any further south than we did, which is just to 2nd Avenue here outside of City Hall. I don't know of any plans to go further, and I don't know if there's a policy in place to make that effort happen. At this time, it was just this section of alley that was taken on, And then as far as grant funding, I don't know if there's anything out there, but we could certainly look in to see if there's some opportunity out there for funding this type
Yeah.
of activity.
I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I know Governor Burgum was here, and we walked some of those, and there was some desire for programs potentially to be able to do that. So it sounds like you're on top of that.
Why are we paving this alley?
Why are we paving it?
Yeah.
It's currently gravel right now.
Right?
And the ride condition's pretty poor. It was it was paved before all of the utilities got put underground, so we'd be restoring it back to the condition that it was in.
But at the developer's request, right? Why isn't the developer paying for this? Because we don't have anything in city code. I think Ms. Osowski's right on. We need to get that somehow codified in as part of our plans.
I would say, Council President, if you wanted to look to a policy, a reconstruction is generally an 80-20 split. So if you want to call this a street, generally what we would do, it'd be a reconstruction, and it would be an 80% city share and 20% special assessed. I think one of the concerns in this area is you have adjacent property owners that didn't necessarily want to bury the lines and stuff. So with that 20%, I think the easy part of this alley is that there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 property owners. As you go further south, you get multiple more property owners, which makes it more challenging. And so I think because of those adjacent property owners, because this is a test alley, to try to see how this works out, that was really the intent. Of not trying to impact other property owners negatively that didn't necessarily need the lines buried.
Okay. Sounds good. Further comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries. Kavami dissents. Thank you. Item 3.4, sidewalk list, project 8752, 2024 city sidewalks. Mr. Lieberman, good evening.
Good evening, Council President Sandy and members of the committee. Each year, the engineering department brings a list of properties to city council where we are recommending the city mandate installation of sidewalks or the replacement of existing sidewalks. This year, this is our first list for 2024 construction. There's roughly 30 properties on the list. Most of these are properties that received their building permits over 9 months ago, and city code currently requires that they install their sidewalks within 9 months of getting their building permits, and they have not done so. The remaining few on this list are responses to citizen complaints about safety, and our staff has gone out and validated that, yes, there is a safety concern, and the property owners should have their sidewalk replaced. Should council approve this list, we provide a letter to each of the property owners with an estimate of what it would cost for the city to have it installed or repaired. And they have the option of hiring their own contractor to do this work if they choose to do so. If they don't, we would accomplish this work this summer with the city contract. So with that, we are requesting approval of this first list for 2024 sidewalks. Depending on requirements, we may bring a second list later this summer as well.
Mr. Lieberman, do you know, is it typically less expensive for a homeowner to get the sidewalks constructed on their own versus what the city charges?
We feel we have a very competitive rate, so it's sometimes advantageous to use the city's contract, but it's hard to tell what type of deal a homeowner might get from other contractors they work with.
Sure. There are comments, questions, thoughts? Osowski moves approval, second by Weber. Anything further? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries. Sandy dissents. Moving on, 3.5, bid award for project 8811, District 604, 2nd Avenue North Storm Sewer, Columbia to North 25th Street. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you again, President Sandy. This project, City Council back on April 1st approved plans and specifications. It will install storm sewer under 2nd Avenue from Columbia to 25th Street, North 25th Street. This is currently out for bids. We anticipate bid opening this week, Thursday, so we're requesting to bring those bids to council next week, Monday, for approval of the low bid.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Item 3.7, 3.6, bid award, City Project 8809, upgrade lift stations 24 and 27. Good evening.
Good evening. This is similar to the last item. The bid opening isn't until Thursday, so just looking for a recommendation for the low bid coming next week, Monday.
Thank you, Ms. Severson. Moved by Osowski, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.7, Withdrawal Management Center transition. Good evening, Ms. Wall. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, President Sandy and members of the committee. We're here today to discuss a proposal based off a shift in needs in our community. I'll cover some historical information, data points, and details for your consideration. Katie Jo Armbrust with the Housing Authority is also here with us to cover a portion of the presentation. Housekeeping item that I want to mention is the topic of our discussion today is what has commonly been referred to in the past as social detox. We'll primarily be using the term withdrawal management in our presentation. 8 years ago, Public Health started operating the Grand Forks Withdrawal Management Center after attempts to find an operating partner were unsuccessful. These past 8 years, we've provided a safe place for those under the influence of substances to detox, meeting that initial need. That said, in reassessing our operations, the needs of our community, the capacity of some of our partners, we recognize that needs have changed and our partnerships have advanced. And this proposal demonstrates our ability to be nimble, to adjust to that. This graph provides data on the number of unique clients each year we serve at the Withdrawal Management Center, as well as the number of admissions each year. This data suggests that the farther the lines are away on the graph, the higher the number of the clients readmitting to the facility. As you can see, utilization slightly decreased once housing opportunities became available in 2018. And as you can also see, we're still serving individuals in need of social detox, but the occupancy rate remains low. Our current operations have capacity of 9 beds, staffed 24/7 by individuals who are trained on the job. Our facility licensure requires us to follow certain vital sign parameters for safe admission to this level of care. As you'll note, some of the demographic information that is collected upon admission reflects a significant number of clients experiencing homelessness. Of the 321 admissions in 2023, 68 of those, or 21%, came from just 5 individuals. This number makes us pause to dig into why this is occurring and brainstorm how we can serve them better. Upon discovery, a couple of these folks were using the Withdrawal Management Center as a shelter. Thus far, in 2024, we continue to see a trend where we've had individuals show up primarily seeking a place to stay. So what are the current alternatives for these folks? Northlands Rescue Mission, a private entity, has admission requirements that are prohibitive of those under the influence. Homeless Helpers offers very short-term and temporary assistance. The All True Emergency Department, expensive and oftentimes inappropriate level of care and resource utilization for these folks. Or they just remain unsheltered, where they're staying in vestibules, parking ramps, town square, or private properties. So how do we take this information and put it into actionable steps? There's multiple components to this plan, so I'll do my best to clarify each one. We initially began this conversation with community partners looking to expand medical withdrawal management services in our community. That's the next level of withdrawal management that we're currently providing. So this next level is oversaw by clinicians, nurses, and providers. We acknowledge that our current space is not suitable for this type of care. With any change, we understand that we need to bridge the current level of service we're providing in the community. So I'm going to put that concept on the shelf and we'll come back to it in a little bit. So given the data on the previous slide, and since I've been in my role, we've leveraged the Social Detox Advisory Board to foster community conversations with other entities that may also serve folks who are struggling with substance misuse. This is where the concept of a low barrier emergency shelter arose. And with that, I'd invite Katie Jo to say a few words about the Housing Authority and their recent work.
So, hi, President Sandy, members of the committee. My name is Katie Jo Armbrust, and I work with the Grand Forks Housing Authority. I'm the Director of Program Development and Advocacy. So, while we, the Grand Forks Housing Authority, have made a lot of progress in reducing barriers to housing, as well as options for people who are experiencing homelessness to find housing, we unfortunately have had a continued conversation of what do we do with the unauthorized people who are seeking shelter in our properties. This can be either in the common spaces where it's the community room or the lounge, or out in our auxiliary spaces, sheds, garages, etc. And while this number is not in the high dozens by any stretch, we have tried to address these situations in the past, but we've learned that unless if you address the root cause of these issues, we're simply displacing the problem. So the proposal in front of you today is for your support in transitioning what is currently the Withdrawal Management Center to the Grand Forks Housing Authority to be operated as a low-barrier emergency shelter. This is something that we were definitely not seeking, but we recognize a community need and know that the answer to homelessness is housing. So our boards did agree that this is something that was suitable for us to move on with. So what is a low-barrier shelter? A low-barrier shelter simply means that we are going to meet people where they are at and let them present as is. It is going to be most important to just make sure that people are safe for themselves and others. We are going to focus on mutual respect between guests and staff, and we are going to work with our community partners that we've already had a number of conversations with, whether that be All True Health, Grand Forks Police Department, CANA, which is our local homeless coalition, Northlands Rescue Mission, Homeless Helpers, and more. We look to develop a referral system with all of those partners, and the nice part is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are other programs, locally within the state as well as across the country that are doing this work every day. That goes the same for developing policies and procedures on how to handle situations and so forth. The key component to the Grand Forks Housing Authority operating an emergency shelter that's low barrier is that we have access to grant funds that are currently not available for operations of social detox. So the Housing Authority can help with housing, but we certainly cannot help with withdrawal management services.
So if the Housing Authority is willing to take on that sheltering portion of those we currently serve, we still need a solution for the clients who seek withdrawal management support. In this separate but very important portion of this transition, Share House is an entity in town that currently operates a residential treatment facility, and their strategic plan includes expanding operations to withdrawal management. So in a separate facility, this new operation would be inclusive of the level of support that we already currently provide, as well as that medical level of support of withdrawal management. As I mentioned earlier, this licensure means that is provided by clinicians in a specialized setting who are knowledgeable in the physiology of the withdrawal process. Share House's current facility doesn't allow them to add the service within their existing footprint. So there's capital and investment required to take this from an idea to reality. Realistically, this may take some time, and so this is where now I'll reintroduce the idea that was put on the shelf earlier of a bridge plan. We've had initial talks with Northeast Human Service Center, who have verbally committed to serving as that bridge for current operation, for the current level of service we're providing until Share House can be operational. If the low barrier shelter is operational for clients only seeking that shelter, their needs would be addressed. And given the data we shared earlier with our current clientele, we anticipate those truly seeking withdrawal management services numbers to be low currently. This bridge plan allows for the service to remain in the downtown area proximal to the current withdrawal management center location. A key caveat of withdrawal management, specifically with the reimbursement model, goes to show that Medicaid and Medicaid expansion allows for a sustainable model. With this reimbursement model, volume is key, so having a large referral area will facilitate sustainable operations for Share House. We get calls on a weekly basis asking about the availability of this level of service. Medical withdrawal management also reduces the burden on emergency rooms because by law, they're required to complete a medical screening exam to everyone that presents there. The provider at the medical withdrawal management facility is qualified to do this. Our current withdrawal management operations does not employ a provider. So overall, this plan adds services to our community while maintaining a continuum level of care adaptable to what the client is seeking. If a client is seeking a shelter, resources from the medical level of care aren't being inappropriately utilized. This slide outlines the current funding partners and their contributions. So breaking down the city's particular contribution for this year is as follows. Last year I came before you and requested an increase in funding because the seed grant funding had run out. And to keep up with competitive wages and inflation, this was necessary. On top of, you also approved previously a one-time funding of $50,000 of the city's opioid settlement funding to support operations. We've had initial conversations with key funding partners and are pleased with the supportive discussions and appear to be moving in the right direction. And additionally, on this slide, you'll see the staffing breakdown of supporting a 24/7 operations as listed. So with this information, we're requesting your authorization to transfer the rest of the 2024 funding to Grand Forks Housing Authority to utilize the current space into a low barrier shelter. With this, staff currently employed by the city in the contracted detox advocate role would transition to Housing Authority employees if they so wish. Additionally, this is an acknowledgement that the city portion of the withdrawal management budget would be transferred to the Grand Forks Housing Authority, and ongoing flat funding requests would come from them, not myself. As I mentioned, we have verbal commitments from the other funding partners to support this change. In conclusion, this slide provides a timeline overview of the moving parts of this plan. We don't take this proposed transition lightly and hope our letters of support are evident of that. So with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions, Ms. Armbrust or Ms. Wall? Yes, Ms. Osowski?
So I know that we discussed, turning over the opiate funds and the remainder of the funds for the year. Are they going to be requesting funds from us every year then? Is that the plan? Like either Housing Authority or what's the other one? Share House? Is that your guys' plan, is to request funding from us every year?
Ms. Olzowski and members of the committee, it is our intent to ask for funding in 2025. From there on out, I would hope not, but there's no guarantee of grant funding.
I guess I was under the impression that it was going to be kind of this year's chunk we would give them, and then after that, you guys would stand alone. And I supported it at that point. I mean, I'm happy to see, us go down in head count a little bit and kind of transfer that onto you where they still have jobs. I think that that's excellent, and I'm really excited for the city to step away from this stuff. I am not excited to hear that your guys' plan is to come back and ask for money already in 2025, because that wasn't what was communicated. Also, I understand that there is an issue with homelessness in our community, but our population is not raising that much, and now all of a sudden we're in a situation where we need an additional shelter. You guys talk about finding the root cause. What is the root cause of that? Because I feel like at this point, all these nonprofits are, more and more are popping up. We're spending federal, state, and city dollars on them, and it doesn't seem to be controlling the problem. It's just expanding you guys, I mean, Share House is supposedly supposed to make a profit off of this, is what I was told at the Board of Health meeting. You guys are saying that you're going to need funding next year. I mean, it's not even, I don't get how we're saving anything. I don't even know if what we're doing is good when we already have a mission, we already have these programs, and now they're out of control where we need more of them. I mean, at some point, I would like to see, you know, us, like, the actual data, you know, of if we are making an impact in our community, or if all these nonprofits are just lining their pockets. I am disappointed to hear that you guys will be back in 2025, because that was not what was shared with me at the Board of Health meeting. So, thank you.
Further comments or questions? Mr. Kavami? No? Okay. Mr. Weber?
I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber. Is there a second? Second by Kavami. Are there further comments? I'm a little bit confused based upon what I've heard tonight. Are you in fact planning to come back in '25? I think you said,
Yeah, for 2025, yes. The intent for moving past that year is that there will be other funding sources readily available. We're already working on those. They're just not a guarantee at this moment.
got it.
So she doesn't know.
Right,
yet.
so she doesn't know. And that-
So far, their future plan is to come back to the city and ask for money.
So for the social detox center, there were multiple organizations that funded the facility all through the county, city. Are you also asking those entities to continue their funding
Correct.
through this year and potentially next year?
Correct. And we've already gotten confirmation from both the state and Altru that they're on board with at least transferring this year's funds.
Okay,
And I know with the state moving forward, they're comfortable with that as well.
great. And I did have one other question, but no, senioritis going on here. I think, are you're going to be using the same facility?
Correct.
Yeah, all right. And just out of curiosity, the personnel, the personnel that currently work in the social detox center are skilled nursing, correct? They're not?
No, they are not.
They're not medical professionals at all?
Nope, they don't hold any licensure. We train them on the job, and they likely have an interest in counseling pathway. We have a lot of students that might be pre-law as well, so it just is dependent. but
So
they
it's a
do-
relatively easy transition to the new positions with the Housing Authority? Okay, great. Anyone else have further thoughts? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Osowski dissents. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Oh, all right. On to item 3.8, housing discussion, accessory dwelling units. Ms. Edwardson, good evening.
Good evening. I don't usually present in front of you guys, so, and at this time it's not parking, so I'm kind of happy about that. I'm Andrea Edwardson, I'm the Deputy City Planner. We had a lovely discussion, or a really good discussion at Planning and Zoning a couple weeks ago, and they're seeking your feedback in terms of a policy discussion on this idea of incremental additional units in neighborhoods. And so, more of a policy discussion and in terms of where we want to see the community grow. But it is in response to a request from a property owner that we have in town. The owner, 1608 12th Avenue South, it's a duplex within the Ben Franklin neighborhood. The zoning map here, you can see there's a single-family neighborhood over here. This one being in the middle of a single-family or duplex. That meaning that there's 2 units are allowed on a property in the R2 district, just 1 unit allowed in the single families. Then the Washington corridor and some higher density multifamily along that. But if we zoom into the block level and the individual kind of immediate neighborhood of this property request, you could see it's an existing duplex. It's got duplexes all around it, or at least nearby. So a true mix of units in this neighborhood, not just a single family that has maybe some sporadic duplexes. It is a good mix in this neighborhood. So what the request is the property owner of the duplex, the 2 units, they're long-term tenants. They have limited abilities to handle any increases in rent. And so when approached by building this new garage, the feedback was, you know, it'd be great to have a garage, but I can't afford the rent increase that's gonna come with it. So the property owner said, well, in a way to finance that, can I put a unit above the garage in order to gain that rent to finance the overall project? The additional unit is what's not permitted by zoning code today. The setbacks, the impervious surface, the building height are all met within the R2. It's the fact of having a third living unit on the property is what is not permitted by zoning code today. So that's the request, and there's a schematic here of the street front of what the current property looks like today, a schematic of what that garage with an apartment unit above might look like back on the alley side. So what this request kind of spurred with the planning department was overall there's in our professional setting, there's a national trend towards promoting these accessory dwelling units. These attached units, or can be attached, can be detached. In this case, it'd be detached. But if you think of your older neighborhoods, they exist in the basement units, the attic conversions, those types of things. There's a strong push nationally to promote them into communities because it's an affordable way to add one additional unit integrated into a neighborhood with little impact to that neighborhood. You're not in the sense of purchasing multiple properties, demoing it, and putting a big high-rise apartment complex. It's that incremental unit that you're going for in the neighborhood. So that single-family district going to 2 units allowed on the property, that R2 district being allowed that third accessory unit on the property is the concept behind it. We kind of already have, to a certain degree, these in town, but they're not traditional ADUs in the sense that our inspections department kind of gave us an idea that homes are building like a secondary unit in the basement, or maybe it's a split off, but because they're like saying it's a home with an attached garage. You go through the garage and you go through the mudroom and you can either go down into that separate unit or you can go off to the main house. Because you're accessing that unit through that mudroom, that internal access, we don't count it as an ADU because it's internally connected. A traditional ADU is an exterior, a very clear separation so that there's no internal action of the 2 units or different families, so to speak, interacting. They may interact in a driveway because the exterior doors go out to that or whatever, but not internal. So we kind of have ADUs in the sense that we are seeing a significant trend of building that additional unit into a house. But as you drive down that street, you don't know that because it's integrated into the housing structure itself. Detached units certainly get more degree of attention because, again, they're very prominent. They're above the garage. You can see them physically detached from the structure. So they tend to get a lot more notice. But if we look at communities in North Dakota that have written accessory dwelling unit ordinances, we don't really have many. Bismarck adopted one in 2016. They've done 11 in the past, approved 11 in the past 8 years. So not a high implementation rate, simply because these do still have to follow building code. So if you think of your traditional garage, it doesn't really have the appropriate footings to just build on top of it. You would have to level most existing garages to put the appropriate footings to house the utilities and everything else that would need to go. So you're talking $50,000 minimum, if not $60,000, $70,000 to build this unit above a garage. It is not something to just put above an existing garage. So there's a financial impact to them, but $70,000 for one additional unit to get the mother-in-law moved into the house or into the property is certainly more affordable than buying a separate unit for her offsite. So kind of thinking that in terms of affordability. Mandancer adopted a code, presumably simply because Bismarck did, but that's hearsay. And then Minot, actually their recent housing study that they recently completed and adopted suggested ADUs as a way to increase their production of units within their community. So whether they adopt a formal ADU ordinance or not is yet to be seen, but it is one of their recommendations out of their housing study to pursue. I believe it's also one under the Fargo-Moorhead housing study as well. So in reaction, how could we handle this? We could look at a very micro scale and address this one request from this property owner in terms of through a mini PUD. We certainly have that zoning parameters. But the question came up of should we be looking at it as an individual, or should we be looking at it if we're going to allow it for somebody, how do we allow it for everybody? And so that's where the owner, and certainly in timing, would prefer that micro level to keep his project going. But from a concept level, the consensus out of P&Z was to take a step back and look at a zoning change to allow this in the R1, R2, if that's the desired outcome for both the commission and council. Can do that a different way, conditional use permit or permitted with conditions. They're very similar words with very different impacts. Conditional use permits require a planning and zoning approval and a notification of neighbors with a public hearing. More control for the neighborhood, I would say, because it gives the neighborhood an opportunity to provide input. But if you look at it from the other side, the developer side, there is much more risk for that developer. We're not talking large companies who can finance and risk the investment into having an architect draw up plans and what that site plan might look like and things like that, and hope that the neighborhood's going to be okay with it. There's much more financial implications for them to put a proposal forward to P&Z and City Council versus others. So that's where the permitted with conditions is much more beneficial to them in that regard. That simply would just set the policy. Commission, City Council would set the rules of where and when an ADU could be permitted in the district, and then staff would administratively approve that. But that code would need to be very clear cut in terms of expectations and essentially check marks to go through and make sure it's being met. So there's a couple different ways to do it if that's the desired outcome. But we asked P&Z, do you prefer the micro individual request level, or do you prefer the larger scale district discussion? In terms of how ADUs fit with our land use plan, it fits right in. Actually, we had it in there that we should, consider looking at the zoning code to permit them to satisfy that multi-generational. When we did a survey with the land use plan, our feedback indicated we do a good job of housing college students and luxury housing, but pessimistic about housing options for middle income, new households, singles, and multi-generational. And that's kind of where this ADU fits that missing middle housing term is kind of the buzzword going through. So they are certainly an option, but if we're not quite ready for them as a community, then that's where we're at. So that's kind of part of the discussion we're having tonight. So what did we hear at P&Z? I would couch it that they were cautiously interested in the idea, some more interested than others, but very concerned on the neighborhood impacts. I would say there was more support for when the unit was one of the units on site was owner occupied. In this specific request, it is a duplex being rented out. The owner would not be on site with that duplex and garage unit being requested. But if that's not the general feedback, then that's kind of the direction we're looking for. Definitely supportive as a way to increase personal property values and tax base. Certainly additional units, just like a building addition to your home, does increase values that way. Some, I would say, were more supportive of that incremental increase than others in terms of what the commission felt. They definitely had questions like, and I think, would all neighborhoods be eligible or just some? And I think that comes down to probably that rental versus owner outlook. I think there's a genuine fear that we are a college town. We do have property owners with significant rentals in terms of quantities and not wanting to just increase those avenues versus this is more interest in supporting that homeowner who's looking to be on site and kind of manage things. Mr. Grasser spoke to some infrastructure capacity concerns, mostly on the stormwater, as you heard with the South End Drainway. But we will point out that building additions, housing additions, driveway expansions, garage expansions, we're seeing a lot of. All of those do contribute to stormwater in general. And so this ADU I wouldn't say exponentially add to that stormwater increase. I think if we have a stormwater capacity increase, we have there's multiple things that are compounding for that versus just an additional garage or driveway with a unit. I think there was, from planning and zoning, more support for the zoning district change versus the PUD. But really, the feedback from them was, let's not get too far down this path in discussing this if there's a significant hesitation at the council level from entertaining the idea. So that's where it was kind of paused from going to the neighborhood meeting and asked to be brought forward to you for feedback and direction. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Edwardson. Are there comments or questions?
Actually,
Mr. Weber?
I actually have more questions for you for a moment. The Blue Ribbon Commission on Housing that you led 10 or 11 years ago?
Yes.
I know that there were
The
recommendations.
greatest Blue Ribbon Commission ever.
Right after the
Phase one
social
and phase two,
infrastructure.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was the greatest Blue Ribbon Commission ever. But the report, I can't find it online. And I remember it was an important report with a lot of recommendations. And I
There
know,
was an original and an updated report.
okay, I'm just not Googling well enough to find it. The recommendations included things like the CLT.
Yep.
And did the commission consider ADUs at all?
I
at
don't
the time?
recall at all.
That wasn't even part of the
I don't believe
conversation
so,
back
no.
at that time. What I did find was the housing dashboard, which was created as part of that commission.
That's true.
And our current vacancy rate in town is 4.5%. And a 4.5% vacancy rate is not enough, even for just people moving around town. Remember, you needed something closer to 6 or 7% was considered. You actually need a vacancy rate to help keep housing prices and rents down and to create some degree of mobility. It seems to me that these
The study
ADUs
found that there is a shortage of housing at every price point.
at every price point.
Correct.
Right.
All across our community, and it's not unique to Grand Forks. It's all across the state, and it's all across the country.
And these ADUs are one of the tools that communities are adopting across the nation to try to deal with that, because housing shortages is a common problem across the country. And these have the benefit of not requiring new infrastructure, new roads, new pump stations, et cetera, new flooding risks, et cetera. In fact, they take advantage of the existing infrastructure. And there was a discussion about this, and Mr. Grosser responded to that, indicating that and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like, I didn't watch the recording, I just read the staff report, that there wasn't any significant threat to our current infrastructure, that our current carrying capacity could add some additional dwelling units in the same area. Am I overstating that?
Well, I always like to speak for Al, but I think from a sanitary capacity, if I think of maybe some of the older neighborhoods, families aren't as big as they were before. So if I think of that regard, I think existing infrastructure for sanitary, we're probably okay there generally. Al's probably like, that's not real data, but as a general census, right, our families are smaller. So an additional unit at that smaller family size is probably somewhere around the general capacity of bygones when they were larger. Stormwater is an issue. The new regulations coming in and managing that, whether you're wanting to expand your driveway to put the trailer on it or something like that, or a bigger garage, or even you want a sunroom on your existing house, not even an additional living unit. We have stormwater capacity issues across the board for all of those things, which is hard to just turn the tap off, right? You don't want to, cities grow with those incremental improvements to properties and things like that, but unfortunately that is just mostly results in increased impervious surface. And so it's a balancing act.
That's a long answer. Do these ADUs threaten to really increase the impervious surface?
I would say no more than a building addition would.
Right.
You don't actually know that, though.
I don't know that, like, if we think about, these are meant to be accessory. They aren't meant to double a housing unit on a lot. They aren't meant to,
Right,
put a
but the
second
gentleman
house
that came forward with this is talking about building a 3-car garage which is currently an impervious surface, or a pervious surface, and making it impervious. Example number 1 is exactly opposite of what you're saying.
I would say, but code would allow him to build that garage today without any city approvals. By right, he could build that garage today at that size and scope. So in that regard, if we have a stormwater issue, then as a whole, we should evaluate when we're allowing those additional on the properties. So you're not wrong. He is adding to his impervious surface, but today he could build that garage without, by right.
Right, but the suggestion, though, extends to other homeowners that currently have garages that might want to build a garage in the backyard to put a living space above it.
I don't know that they'd be increasing impervious if they're putting it above the garage. It would
They
be.
may want to build a detached garage like this gentleman is doing in a location where they already have their garage. So I get what you're saying. He could do this anyway, but so potentially could every single other person that comes forward. Thank you.
But one of the things we're being asked for is our opinions about this, and we could design a policy that puts limits on that additional impervious surface, right?
Right now, code does cap, like an R2 district, it's capped at 40% of the lot. No more than 40% can be impervious to try to mitigate those concerns.
Let me try a different tack on this. It was mentioned a moment ago, we have smaller families. In fact, a lot of the housing in this country, and I'm sure in our city as well, is inhabited by empty nesters. We have people that look like me living in 3 and 4 bedroom homes. And we don't want to leave our neighborhoods. We don't want to leave our homes. We'd love to downsize, but we like where we're living and it's expensive to move. This is an opportunity for elderly folks like myself to stay in their neighborhood, downsize, and create a home for families that need the larger space. That's one of the reasons for moving forward with these, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Further comments? Mr. Weber?
It feels to me like this is a tool for our toolbox to address the lack of housing at all price points in our community and to build the property tax base in those parts of town where we would not need to build additional infrastructure. Yeah, that's...
Ms. Osowski, or Mr. Weigel, yes, sir?
What's the definition of an accessory dwelling unit? And I ask that, obviously, somebody's looking at building a garage with a living quarters above it. But I saw the county was just selling or auctioning off 3 trailer units for like $300 each. Could I take that trailer and put it in my backyard and have that as an accessory dwelling unit?
It would have to have a proper foundation with proper utility hookups and meet all other building code to be a safe, livable unit.
So it'd just have to be similar to what's in a trailer park right now. There's very little for foundations on those.
There are still permanent foundations with those and hookups, but in that case, like, the code can be written to limit it to a certain size. I think Bismarck limits theirs to like, I think 1,800 square feet or smaller. Even I might have gotten that mixed up. I want to say 800 square feet. So it can be, the code can be written to ensure that it is meant to be like the size of a studio efficiency, to limit your concern about moving a park model, essentially, right?
Ms. Osowski, yes?
I guess one of the reasons why I purchased my home is because it is by other homes. I didn't purchase my home to live next to multi-unit dwellings. I see, and I live on the north end by UND in Ward 2. I'm sure a lot of you know that. We have an issue with students renting in our community and just say, you know, a developer comes in and start, you know, they already built 4-bedroom homes on these lots. They start putting up garages. Our streets are plump full. There are already safety hazards when you drive around Ward 2 because of all the cars parked on the road. We can't plow. It's a huge issue. Not only that, but I think Memorial Village 2, there's not enough parking there already for that development. And so, and I think some people get pretty creative when we start loosening our zoning rules when it comes to these things. I chose to live where I live because it is single-family homes. I don't want these being popped up around my neighborhood at all. I would have chose to live in an area like that. I just see that there could be, although Mr. Weber, you know, pointed out a lot of good that could come from it, you know, I think the mother-in-law suites, you know, are maybe a good idea, but I think this can get out of control very quickly within our community, and I don't want to live next to one of these. I don't want a trailer being pulled in and being set up. I don't want a shed from Menards being put on a foundation and then it being told to me that this is someone's home. I disagree with it, and I think us doing this could lead us down a very risky path. So I'm against it altogether.
Thank you, Ms. Osowski. Mr. Weber,
It seems that there's been some suggestions now about pulling in trailers or pulling in a shed. And I think that a carefully crafted policy regarding ADUs could actually help to control some of that activity that would currently be allowed, that we probably don't want.
Right. I think the zoning comes along with the house. I think people look at what they're moving around, and when they purchase property, that's how they expect it to be. I mean, I may be misspeaking, but I believe people in the mayor's area, they didn't want to live next to an apartment complex. I mean, that's not how everybody wants to live. And it could push a lot of people out of our community, especially on the north end. I mean, if we start getting more and more compact in Ward 2, there are going to be a lot of issues. I mean, we already have homes with these students that are overfilling. We don't even know who's living there. Our roads are packed. It's a safety issue at this point in Ward 2. You can't even get emergency vehicles down those roads sometimes by the way these people park. You can't get out of alleys. We don't even have a way to regulate who's living in these rentals. So then why are we going to add to the problem? And then, I mean, you can say, oh, it's just a 1-bedroom. Yeah, but now you have 10 kids living at this property, and you know, or they say 5, but now there's 10, because, you know, it's never really what they say it is in Ward 2 anyways, so.
The line that if we have too many people move in, it'll make people move out, reminds me of the line that nobody goes downtown anymore, it's too busy. We do have a problem, and the problem is a lack of housing at all price points, and a desire to increase property tax value and the tax base, addressing some of the housing pricing issues, home pricing issues in our community, and this is the way to do it. What we were being asked to do tonight, if I understand correctly, was to provide some feedback before we move forward with some neighborhood meetings. The intention is to go ahead and gather more public input and to just ask for our ideas before moving towards that. Is that right?
Right. If there's a desire to explore look further into exploring changing the zoning code to what conditions will we set forward if there's that. If it's a flat no, because Ms. Osowski's not the only one who's expressed those concerns of,
right.
I moved to my neighborhood as is. So, I mean, it's valid and many people have that same feeling. So if the desire is no, not at all, we won't spend staff time on the project and move forward and looking at that because we're just not ready to tackle that at this point in time. So it's a consensus on is there interest or not, and either answer is good, so.
Mr. Veen, you've had your light on for quite a while. Yes, sir.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm looking at maybe from a different angle, that the current zoning regulations that come with a property, I feel like is a property right. So everybody has that. When you start changing those regulations, you're changing property rights that belong to the property owner. So I have an issue with changing that unless you have, within a certain radius, property owners concur that they're willing to give up that right to somebody else who wants to build something. That would be the only way, or else not at all. But I couldn't support a blanket one, but we might be able to support one, but it's got to have the feedback and the approval of adjacent property owners to do that. So that was my thoughts.
Yeah, Mr. Kavami.
Similar thought, could it be new property, new zoning? We could have a new type that could accommodate this, but then everyone would know what they're getting into.
Why wouldn't we just call it R2?
Sure.
Because that's what it's zoned for, or R4. We have zoning for these things. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Agreed.
I'm sorry, Mr. Veen, were you okay. I guess generally speaking, this is a request to change zoning and increase the density of property all across our city. This is not just one person coming forward. This is a request to increase the density of all properties in the city of Grand Forks. I don't think it's fair or reasonable for us to ask homeowners that have been here for all these years to change their zoning of their property. I disagree with the concept. I think I could be okay if you wanted to include accessory buildings in future developments, but if that's the case, then the developers would come forward and ask for different zoning classifications so that they could do it. To me, this is a non-starter. So, that's just my opinion. I don't know.
I think what I'm hearing is, I guess we'd be looking for, is it a flat no? And is it a with conditions? I'm
a
hearing
flat
some
no.
flat no's.
I'm a flat no.
Yeah, it's a non-starter. Why don't we, do you want to make a motion? Somebody make a motion.
I would move that we discontinue exploring this modification to current zoning.
Is there
I'll
a second?
second.
Second by Osowski, motion by Kavami. Further conversations? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Weber,
I
thanks.
will just say I do appreciate the discussion and the ability to talk about it, and so I
Thank you.
was appreciative. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here tonight. Item 3.9, Beacon by Epic project update. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy, members of the committee. Last week, Thursday, Dan Gosted, Maureen Storsted, and myself, along with a few others, we had the opportunity to meet with Epic last week regarding the Beacon by Epic project. And so we've put it on the agenda. The staff report got added later today. So kind of summarizing, what we heard from Epic is that they need to take a pause on adding the third building. There's two buildings that have gone up. They're finishing up. When they were here, when we were all here last year, December, we made some amendments to that particular development agreement. So this would be a second request for an amendment. I think when we were back here in December, we were talking about a mixed-use third building that would have a hotel component along with apartment units. What we were told last week, Thursday, and we have representatives from Beacon here that can also speak in Lance and Tamara, that building under the current financial conditions to include interest rates, they are not able to move forward with the third building. So the request in front of you, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gosted to come up and talk about the amendment changes, and then ask Epic to just fortify what we went over. Number one, this is an important time because, as you recall, we were going to sell a bond after 2 of the 3 buildings were completed. That would give the first tranche, and then the third building would give the third, or the second tranche of bonding. So I don't think in the foreseeable future, we can see right now the third building going up. I assume it will go up at some point, but really it would be one bond sale to help pay for the public event space. So when we met last week, we wanted to make sure that what the city bargained for in the public event space, the kind of the base level services would be provided in that. And in the second half of the staff report, it goes over kind of the current bonding capacity is estimated at 4.8 million, and that would be for the 2 buildings. The city has dedicated about $1.15 million in beautification funds to that particular project. And then right now, the developer funds would go in right now between Epic, Community Contractors, and Dakota Commercial at $600,000. So that provides a revenue stream of $6.5 million plus. And so we met, and there's now a new kind of itemized list that's attached regarding what amenities will be included in the base public event space. So there'll be general plaza construction, and the stage has already started going up out there. We wanted to make sure that the water splash feature was completed, so that's incorporated in. And then really the centerpiece was the ice arena with permanent ice. And so that's all included right now. One of the things that has been removed is a permanent ice chiller. That would be a rental unit that would be on site as opposed to purchasing a permanent chiller. The budget estimates are a permanent chiller is on the order of about $900,000, and so that is not incorporated to be a rental unit. We've heard anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 a month to rent a chiller throughout the winter season. In addition, there'd be all the sound systems, the lights, the Wi-Fi that would make this a true event space for whatever event that is going out there. And then, as you recall, the 1923 building, which is the first building, has the city space with the locker rooms or the restrooms that is complementary to the event space. So that would all be included as part of the baseline project. Things that have been taken out are some of the, I'll call it the bells and whistles, the video, some of the technology, the marquee entrance sign. As I spoke, the purchase of the permanent ice chiller, and then a portion of the furniture, fixtures, and equipment would be left out of this particular project. We will have a Zamboni as part of that, and Lance Johnson from Epic did note that they're going to be able to purchase a used, almost new Zamboni from the Ralph Engelstad Arena. So, thanks to Jody and his crew over there for providing a good deal that we can get that moving forward. The other thing Marine has put in here is a timeline to sell the bonds. And, when we were here last time, I think we were hoping for the event space to be open in June, and then that slipped to August, and we're likely more talking September. So really gearing up for the winter season and likely missing the summer season of concert events. So what Marine has stated is that there is an attached bond schedule for the revenue bond, and really we need to move everything 1 month out. So we would be back here, if you did approve this amendment, we'd be back here in June with a resolution for you to approve to move forward. There would be a sale in August, and then the proceeds would come in September. That would coincide with the public event space being completed in that time frame as we move forward. With that, I'd ask Mr. Gostad to go over some of the development agreement particulars and have Maureen add anything, and then I would ask Epic to come up and give a final overview.
Mr. Gostad, thank you. Been looking forward to this all night.
Thank you, President Sandy and members of the committee. The modifications, if you recall, just as a reminder of what the TIF is going to do is there's going to be a maximum amount of the bond, right? And that maximum bond will be based upon the revenue stream that can be generated off of the buildings that were to be built. We were to get 80% of that.
Right, the property taxes.
Yes.
Thank you.
80% of that would be used then to service the TIF bond. From the property owner's standpoint, it doesn't look any different. It's how you allocate those taxes that are paid. 80% of that revenue source would be used to fund our TIF bond. The other 20% still gets allocated to the various taxing entities. And so the way it was calculated to begin with is there was 3 buildings that we were anticipating as what the value would be. The first 2 buildings would be able to service a TIF bond of about, like Todd said, $4.8 million. The third building was anticipated to be able to service another $2.3 million of revenue, if my memory serves me. So the changes as being proposed now would be, the agreement would be focused entirely on Building 1 and Building 2 as the source of revenue. Building 3 would still be incorporated within the agreement if it gets built. And so that revenue stream, if it gets built in the future, could be used to fill the gap, buying a permanent chiller, for example, or those other items that were not included within this first phase of the public plaza. That's what's being proposed. And those would be the changes that I'd be working on, right, to focus it in on Building 1 and Building 2 as being the source of the revenue from the TIF and to service the TIF bond. The other thing that we talked about and has been contemplated from the beginning, as I understand it, is that there is still going to be a shortfall. Even with the 3 buildings, there was still going to be a shortfall in being able to fund the public plaza. And that's what that $1.1 million beautification funds were going to be used for. And if you recall, when we were here the last time, the developer wanted those funds in advance of the public plaza being completed. The way the original agreement was set up is those funds would not be paid until the plaza was completed, and we'd take title to the plaza at that point. Well, they wanted it before we took title, before the plaza was done. So we created some additional conditions in order for the developer to get those $1.1 million beautification funds to really to be used for the construction of the plaza before we took title. Those conditions were we'd take a first lien on the public plaza lot and also the lot where the Building 3 would be located to secure that $1.1 million. We'd also, there was a condition that their financing from Bank Forward would be closed, and that financing from Bank Forward would be used again to build the public plaza. In addition, there was to be certifications provided by the contractor and by the developer that with the city beautification funds, the funds from the Bank Forward loan, the developer's own money, that would be enough then to complete the public plaza, to assure that when we put our money in, it'll be completed. So those were the things that were added as conditions. In addition, the condition was the developer was to deposit between $2.3 and $2.5 million in the bank at Bank Forward, and those funds would be used solely for the construction of the public plaza. And we'd get all those certifications from the bank and those representations from the bank. Everything up to this point was going fine. The bank was fine with what we had proposed. They have a first lien, I think, on either one or both of the lots where we take a security interest in. The bank has agreed to subordinate their interest so that we'd be in a first position on those lots. We've done some title work on it, and we would be with the subordination. The bank was fine with respect to closing the loan, having those funds, having the money deposited. The difference now is all those conditions are staying the same, with the exception that instead of the 2.3 and 2.5 being deposited by the developer, it's going to be between $600,000 and $700,000. That would also be a change. And that's reflective of the reduction evidently the reduction in what would be constructed out that public plaza. So that's really the changes. There'll be some definitional changes There'll be some timing changes, because right now, the public plaza, under the agreement, was to be completed by, I think, July 31st. That would be extended out to September. Also, there was some discussion about the possibility of Lot 3 being transferred to another party. That, there would be some language with respect to the assignment of the TIF and the obligation that whoever would acquire that lot would be subjected to that TIF and the revenues from that third building in the future, if that would happen, under those set of circumstances. So those are in a very kind of a 30,000-foot view. The agreement is 40-some-odd pages long. I won't go through all the details, but those are primarily the changes that would be reflected, that I'd be working on if this was approved.
Thank you, Mr. Gosted. We're going to need that third building to be built just to pay your fee.
President
Sandy? Yes?
Just to recap, Todd and Dan did a good job going through all this, but I did just attach that budget bond timeline, just so you can see the process that we go through when we are ready to move forward. Like they stated, we're looking at shifting this out primarily, or estimated about a month. But it'll just give you a sense of the steps that are involved and when it'll be coming forward to council. I just did want to point out a couple things. You'll see on here, they had listed parameters resolution, and that might not look familiar to you. I reached out, and which is a little bit different than the resolutions you've seen in the past. And you most likely won't see that going forward on this one. It was just the timing of when we were looking at this particular sale, crossing that 4th of July week, and in the essence of wanting to attract plenty of attention on this and avoiding that 1st of July council meeting is why that had been in here, giving a pricing committee and a parameters resolution. So you would be looking at most likely just the normal resolutions you generally look at with a bond sale. The other thing is, it's been already stated, but as was stated, they pay their property tax bill in full. 100% of the base value is paid and shared by all taxing entities. 20% of the incremental value is shared to all taxing entities. It's that 80% portion that will be used to pay for this tax increment financing bond, and that's estimated. Right now, we're estimating 6% interest on that, and it's completely supported by those first two buildings.
If you don't mind, Council President, say I'd ask Lance on behalf of Epic Development just to summarize kind of where they're at and why we're here asking for the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. We don't want to be here today. We'd rather be developing the third building. When we met with some members of your city staff several months ago to discuss, we're looking at the good news that we'd see interest rates possibly drop up to 3 times this year, and that's changed to possibly once, and in the fall. We also mentioned, or Todd mentioned, a third party looking at that. That was something that we explored because we didn't want to see this this momentum slow down. But when we met with a partner and they took a look at the third building to develop themselves, they couldn't make it work financially either. So it's not our best business interest to move forward with building 3 at this time. With that said, it is an expensive piece of property that we want to develop as soon as it's feasible, and then those tax increments will go to fund what was referred to as the bells and whistles. I guess we're excited to move forward. It's not the path we wanted, but it's where we're at, and we appreciate the partnership.
Mr. Weber?
Can you help us understand the degree of completion at this point? Because there are people living in both buildings? Or?
Yes, both buildings 1 and 2 are complete. Building 1 and building 2, all apartments are full. Building 1, we have, I think, 8 apartments that are not rented. Currently, the slow part has been commercial. We do have 1 renter in the second building, that will start fit-up construction. Excuse me, we do also have one on the second floor of the first building that'll be starting construction soon. We do have condos in the second building, 18 total, and I think we have 3 contracted, so a little slow there, but it's been picking up.
And the extent of your business model, how dependent was it that upon the retail?
The commercial space.
2/7, I guess 2 floors are dependent on the retail of the 7 floors.
And is there any way, at this point, you can't convert that to additional housing? You're committed to?
You could at a expense.
At an expense. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Phelan, so I'll try not to be as crass as I feel right now. So with all due respect to the developers who are good people and working hard and want to do a really good project in our community, so I don't mean to be negative toward you guys. That's not my intention here. But I agreed to the TIF in the first place because we had a bill of goods that we were getting. And we put off renovating Town Square, which we were intending to do. We were going to make an investment for the community because we were getting a different Town Square. And I wasn't excited about moving Town Square from the river where we were to away from the river. But in discussions with administration, with the council, we thought it was a good idea, get some renovation and new buildings downtown. I don't feel like we're getting what we had originally intended, and I'm not prepared today to say we should move this forward. I wholeheartedly disagree with just changing our plan because the TIF won't support what our plan was. If we're going to make a change, so I don't know what the urgency is today for making a decision today and then in 2 weeks. I really want to take a step back and say, are we actually doing what is best for our community when the plan was to have a certain amenity? Because we're not getting what we were looking for, we should be doing that different amenity somewhere else. We have them paying property tax. We could take that property tax money that's coming in, dedicate it to a project anywhere we want. So, again, this is just my opinion, but I'm not super excited today, right? And I think scaling back a project just simply because that's all the TIF can pay for isn't necessarily, perhaps we should invest more of our own money to make it what we want. I don't know what the answer is, but just coming forward and saying we should scale down the project just because the TIF can't afford it, I'm not prepared to say that that's what we should do. I'm not saying we shouldn't. Today, after 8 minutes of a presentation, I don't know how I could possibly support this.
And I think Council President Sandy, I think we're here because what I heard from Lance and Epic is if an amendment doesn't come, no construction is going to move forward. So we're at a bit of a stalemate. That's why we're here. I would say generally the base structure will provide the event space that the community was looking for. It's going to provide you a 40,000 square foot space. I think it was larger before the first amendment. It's going to be similar in size to the West Fargo events. It's going to have the stage, it's going to have the sound, it's going to have lights, it's going to have the Wi-Fi, it's going to have the water feature. It's going to have the ice arena with the boards around it. It's going to have the public space for, the bathrooms and that sort of thing. In the meantime, I think some of the video boards and some of the more light fixtures and all those things are not going to be there. Some of the furnitures and those things that would fill in the space are not going to be there. But I think it's going to function the way that the public would have anticipated. In the meantime, the city's put up a large video board at the base of the Demers Avenue overpass. So I think some of the video boarding probably wouldn't have moved forward. It would not have made as much sense as it did when we had absolutely nothing there. Now we have this large video board that we've approved. Again, this is all new to us, and we deal with the facts that are in front of us. And the town square at the time, the challenge we had at that space is the square was a square. We were looking at investing $5 million, of which we didn't have. This was a way to help finance something as a part of a public-private enterprise and get a larger space where we could actually do larger events. The other benefit was working with Epic as part of this development is that we could have events that would come both to West Fargo, that would also come to Grand Forks. They would be bringing more and more larger events to our downtown area. I think that scale is probably scaled back a little bit, but again, I think we have an issue of we have a middle ground between two buildings that is meant to be a public event space that I think from a baseline will have all the amenities that we asked for. It'll have to be reviewed as we go forward in construction. But that's where we're at, and I think that's part of the problem when maybe some of these buildings were relied upon a lower interest environment. And we started this project in the midst of the pandemic, and lo and behold, we're approaching 2025, 5 years later, and the economics of the project have changed, and that's the problem with phasing projects from building 1 to 3. And so that's where we are today. It's news to us, and I think it was important to get it today because we know we have the 5th Monday, and in the first meeting in May, it'll be back with you for further consideration.
Could I? One thing that I did want to point out is I was looking at our notes from our first meeting 4 years ago. At that time, we pledged we're going to put $40 to $50 million of development there. And we're at building 2, and we've put $40 million towards that. Now, interest rates have changed. I mean, we wish, even if it just for the 40, if the interest rates hadn't changed, we would have been able to build the entire plaza as intended with just the 2 buildings. But it's different circumstances.
Mr. Veen? Yes, sir.
Mr. Sandy, I really concur with the comments that you made. I'm questioning about today how I could move forward with, I'm wondering, I need a little bit more data. I'd like to know, number one, what the risks are that the city has put with this thing. What some of the losses that we won't get, what happens with the do-nothing alternative, so that we got some better idea of what these implications. I was disappointed when we did the amendment number 1. Now we're doing amendment number 2. I'm further disappointed. It may be we have no choice because it's better than nothing, but I don't know if I can understand that away what each of those alternate options are for us. So if we could get some better data, I think it'd be extremely helpful for me.
Mr. Kavani? Yes, sir.
Just a question on the ice chiller that we rent, who's paying for that?
It would come out of operational funds, so depending on the operational management budget for that year, it would be incorporated in that. And I just want, it's $15,000 per month was the quote we received from American Arena.
Perfect. Next, follow-up question. So, my comment last time was are we required to publicly bid these dollars? And I think the TIF dollars that you guys are doing, I think that totally makes sense that the developer wouldn't have to. But is this something that we've ever done before where we've spent $1.1 million without bidding it publicly? Has that ever been done?
Not that I'm aware of, Councilmember Kavami. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
Can we require it to be public bid?
President Sandy, I think the discussion the last time around was that we were going to have city staff participate in the review process, and I don't know, I think there was at least a meeting today that I understand, but I don't know what the extent or what the outcome of that particular meeting was.
Okay.
Right, there was going to be a committee. Right. So you mentioned that committee exists and there was a meeting today? Who's on that committee these days?
No, we disbanded the committee. This was city staff meeting with Epic regarding reviewing the public event space itself.
Mr. Weigel, comments, sir?
Lance, when I pull up Google and I look up Epic, it says Epic lays out plan to develop area around West Fargo Sports Arena. The Wave Water Park poised for Epic debut in Fargo. Those are both your projects, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So I've heard multiple times interest rates. those interest rates severely impacting the projects that you happen to also be doing in Fargo at this same time, or not?
Definitely, they all have, and I've got Tamara, our Vice President of Finance, here as well today. Fortunately for us, the two buildings at the Beacon that are open today were financed prior to the height that we see the interest rates at today. It all depends on how the project is put together and what the project is. We're in Grand Forks, we have two buildings with commercial space that's not being rented. So not only interest rates, but also demand, I think, curves that interest for us to build a third building at this time. And I don't think we're going to be without the third building, and I can't guarantee when it's going to be built. But we're going to build it, and whatever that TIF capacity that is left on that building, we're going to purchase those bells and whistles. And interestingly enough, as I look through the budgeting of this, if we would have put the 2.3 million down today and went forward with the full budget, the amount of interest to carry that 2.3 million for 2 years is several $100,000. If we break it apart the way we were asking today and the building goes up in the next several years, we'll actually have more dollars that'll be usable to purchase items for the plaza. So there'll be less interest expense overall, even though it's not happening as quickly.
I think so again, for fear of sounding like I'm attacking this company, I'm really not. That's not my intention, because these things happen. But I feel like, are we going to bail out every developer that doesn't hedge their interest rates? If I buy a house tomorrow and I take a 5-year ARM, and 5 years from now the interest rate is 25%, who's going to bail me out? Right? I'm really having a hard time right now. So I would love to have a little more time to think about this. So I don't know, again, I'm not sure that we have an immediate need to make a decision in the next 2 weeks. So unless somebody has a real...
Council President, maybe, Lance, you talked about your time frame. Why don't you let the council know, what are you waiting for to move forward with further construction?
Well, it's funding. We've got about $700,000 of our own finances, or we've paid for $700,000 of bills so far. The big thing is to the rink company to put the piping and the concrete in the plaza is a 45-day window. So we need to get the concrete done around that area before that can happen. So, I mean, eventually we'll run out of time to have a permanent rink there this winter.
I'm not going to make a motion. I would suggest we table till the next committee of the whole meeting so we can wrap our arms around this and perhaps have a further discussion at council about what we want for a community plaza.
I second you.
And I'm not making that motion. That's what I would appreciate, but
couldn't we just do that at the next council meeting if we decided at that time? Ken has asked for some additional information. I'm not sure who would give us that additional information.
Well, city staff would work with Epic to provide more, as we worked on today, to get a better picture of what that space will look like and what the components are. You know, this is all news. So if you moved it forward without a recommendation 2 weeks from now at city council in advance, we would have additional information. And if you want more information, we'll make sure we get as much as we can in advance of that.
again, I'm not against this project, but all things considered, we can take the property tax revenues from these buildings and put them anywhere we want to. And so I'd like to have a discussion about what exactly do we want? Because we had what we wanted, and then it changed, and now it's changing again, and I'm not buying it right now. So I would like to have an open discussion about what we think our community might want and need, and maybe in the next 2 weeks, we'll hear from people and they'll tell us what their thoughts are. So everyone's welcome to make any motion that they want to.
I'll make a motion to table for 2 weeks.
To table to the council meeting?
I'll second that.
Okay. No discussion
At the
after.
council meeting, we could give us more time, but
Right.
that would give us at least 2 weeks.
Sure.
Council President Stanley, if I could recommend the word postpone to the next city council meeting.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Postpone. Motion and a second. Further comment? Yes, Mr.
Is
Gavoni?
there going to be further discussion on the committee or how these decisions are being made? So is it just to us in 2 weeks?
Yeah, it just comes back to us in 2
And so
weeks.
by doing that at council, does that give us the venue to have this discussion?
I would believe so. Yeah. I think right now, all options are on the table.
Perfect.
Further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Well, further council member comments for discussion? Mr. Weigel, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Nope. Ms. Osowski?
I just have one question. Has Epitome purchased their land yet? Because it's getting to be the end of April now, and I believe that's when you said it was going to happen.
Council President Stanley and Councilmember Osowski, I do not believe they have.
Okay.
They are having a North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality permit hearing this week.
Okay.
So they do have a draft air permit. I would anticipate after the public hearing, and they get some questions, and I would anticipate they're going to get a final air permit probably within the next 30 to 60 days. In talking to Mr. Egan, he does have a major investor that's planning to come to Grand Forks in June. And I would assume after that June meeting and on that entity's final contemplation, he's leaning more towards a fall start at this point. I don't anticipate him giving us the go sign until sometime probably in that August, September timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kavami?
Yeah, just a comment on the committee discussion. I think if we're going to have further discussions with Epic, it would be good to understand what's being presented potentially before Friday afternoon or Monday morning. So if there is going to be discussions, if that could just be reported back, I'm not asking to serve on the committee, but just whatever the fruits of that discussion, if they could be shared as soon as possible.
Yeah, with pictures, yeah. Some cool pictures.
Well, just pictures, so it's easier to, what you were getting, what you're getting now.
Mr. Veen, anything? No? Council Vice President Weber?
I'll just follow up on Ms. Osowski's question, Mr. Phelan. In the same way that the city looks to the development agreement to make sure that various conditions are met before we take the plunge, Mr. Egan's doing the same thing. He's wanting to know the results of the air study, et cetera. He's doing his own due diligence before purchasing the land, I'm guessing, right?
And I think we've always talked about getting a final air permit provides two things, some assurity to the debt and equity on this particular project, and number two, they can't start construction until they have the air permit. And so even if they wanted to go out and do some site work, you can't do that without the air permit.
Very good, thank you. That's all I have.
So, Mr. Phelan, for the next meeting, it would be great if you would talk to Epic about the budget draft they provided. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work that goes directly to them in here, which I don't understand how it is that we're backtracking out projects, yet they're still taking huge gobs of money from the TIF from us for doing the construction.
And in addition, if you look through there,
Huge gobs.
there's land development, or there's the property itself, the 40,000 square feet is getting reimbursed. The demolition, whatever that portion of demolition is also contained within that square
So
footage.
I would be willing to bet they could sharpen their pencil potentially as well, so.
So we will work on, again, we just found out this Thursday, we will work to get all the details and keep sharing that with you along the way.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Is there a motion to adjourn by Osowski, second by Weigel? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good meeting tonight. Thank you.